Chapter 25-20. Hiss, Xiaohua took in a cold breath when he saw the situation. This Qin mumming can even give birth to sword light on his arm. It seems like he already has the feeling of transforming into a sword. Li Feiyu might not be his match. Just as this thought appeared in Xiaohua's mind, he saw Qin Mu Ming laughing heartily. His empty hand clenched into a fist and smashed towards Li Feiyu. However, sword light also flickered on that fist as though this fist was the sword light itself. Li Feiyu was naturally not afraid of this. His other hand also formed a spell and a blue shield light appeared in mid-air, blocking the front of the fist. With a crisp crack, the fist was really like a sword light stabbing into glass. That shield light transformed into flowing light and fell down. Just as Li Feiyu waved his hand and numerous shield lights appeared again, suddenly, a pure blue sword light that was about the thickness of a thumb suddenly appeared from the flying sword that was swallowing Li Feiyu's sword light. It was the flying sword that had stabbed into Li Feiyu. Crack, crack, crack. It was actually similar to the sound of the shield light shattering. An extremely deep crack actually appeared on Li Feiyu's flying sword from this sword light. Ah! Pre-celestial heavy water. This flying sword of yours is refined by pre-celestial heavy water? Li Feiyu was astonished. This flying sword was his natal magic treasure and he could acutely sense the abnormality of Qin Mumming's flying sword. At the same time, his primordial spirit was also damaged. Why would Qin Mumming answer him? That sword light rapidly shrank and pierced towards Li Feiyu's huge sword again. Whoosh! Brilliance flourished around Li Feiyu's body and where his magic power surged, the huge sword was rapidly retracted. Furthermore, it was gradually shrinking. Just as that huge sword escaped from the range of Qin Mumming's sword light, Li Feiyu's figure flashed past and actually flew towards the other side of the karst cave. Behind him, a shield light that was several yards big suddenly appeared with a wave of his hand. Where are you running to? Qin Mu Ming had hit the enemy in one move and shouted out loudly. His body also slightly distorted as he chased after Li Feiyu like a wave. The shield light that Li Feiyu had struck out was instantly shattered by him, and it was only delayed by a flick of a finger. Although Li Feiyu wasn't fleeing in the direction of Xiaohua's group, Qin Mumming's spiritual sense had long sensed their arrival. However, Qin Mumming only coldly swept his gaze over the three of them. His figure flashed several hundred feet in front of Xiaohua's group. He didn't attack the three Dao sect disciples who were in the late foundation establishment stage. Motherfucker, why don't you do it? Li Zongbao scolded angrily in his heart. When he saw Xiaohua watching the battle with interest and not going up to help, he knew he didn't want to make a move. If Qin Mu made a move, Xiaohua would definitely make a move, but Qin Mu didn't care. Although that was what Li Zongbao thought, he didn't dare to do it himself. When Qin Mumming's figure disappeared into the karst cave, Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Then, he took the lead and flew to the back where Qin Mumming and Li Feiyu were fighting. Big brother. Xiao Mao was behind Xiaohua. When he saw Li Zongbao rushing inside without thinking, he couldn't help but worry. He transmitted his voice. That sword cultivator Qin Mumming is extremely powerful. I'm no match for him. Big brother. Can you do it? Yes, it's not a big problem. Xiaohua blinked his eyes and said, "What's wrong?" This Qin Mumming is also from the Void Heaven Sword School. He seems to be Qin Jian's junior. Xiao Mao said embarrassedly, "I feel that. The three of us actually have designs on Qin Jian. It's a little crazy." "Yes, just the two of you. Is a dream." Xiaohua said with a smile, "With Big Brother, haha, that dream might come true." "Yes, I understand. However, Big Brother should be careful. This sword cultivator's attack power is too strong. Chongbai Sec's martial Uncle Li's flying sword is already powerful enough, but he still can't defeat Qin Mumming." "Yes, Big Brother knows. You have to be careful too." Xiaohua nodded. "After this battle you will become famous. This name must stay in the hands of the living." "Yes." Xiao Mao's heart felt warm. He really didn't expect that the call of Big Brother from decades ago would change his fate. The fate in this world was too wonderful. Woo boom! A violent tremor shook the cave. A helpless and low voice faintly came from the distance. "How dare you, Martial Uncle Chehui? Hurry!" Li Zongbao heard and hurriedly urged. He also flew over. Okay. Xiaohua saw that Li Zongbao was in a hurry and had already flown in front of him. After passing through several caves, Xiao Hua's eyes lit up. He saw that this was a blue space that was about a few li in size. There were fist-sized flashes on the stone walls. These flashes immediately attracted Xiao Hua's attention. Martial Uncle Che Hui. Zongbao is here to help you. Li Zongbao followed Xiao Hua in. His gaze was different from Xiao Hua's. After sucking in a breath of cold air, he hurriedly shouted. In the center of this space, a giant wolf was emitting a threatening aura. It was holding a demonic weapon that looked like a halberd. It was pouncing towards a short and thin cultivator with gray hair. That cultivator was holding a magic weapon that looked like a horsetail whisk. That horsetail whisk had tens of thousands of threads that were flashing with a golden brilliance. Every thread seemed to be an extremely sharp sword. Whoa! With a muffled sound, the giant wolf's halberd plunged into the light dust. The sharp horsetail whisk extended its antennae like a sea anemone and blocked the halberd. However, the demonic weapon's boundless strength suppressed the horsetail whisk. Not only did the horsetail whisk flicker, even Chu Hui's body was smashed down a few feet. However, below Che Hui was another giant with an almost naked upper body. In his hand was a mace. This giant was actually a few times bigger than the one Xiao Hua saw before. Even the mace was a few times bigger. This giant waved the mace and smashed it towards Che Hui, who was falling down. Although there was still a distance of several zhong between them, the sound of the wind from the mace and the huge wave of qi rushed towards Che Hui's legs. An unconcealable sense of crisis immediately made Che Hui's body tremble. It was already difficult for the demonic weapon to block the giant wolf. This time, the brilliance of the horsetail whisk trembled again. Hearing Li Zongbao's voice, Che Hui panicked. He didn't even have time to look at Li Zongbao. He tried his best to circulate his magic power. While his body was barely able to fly upwards, he shouted, "You rushed here. Quickly leave. This is not a place you can come." When Li Zongbao saw that Che Hui was in danger, he panicked at first. However, when he looked carefully, his heart calmed down. He had seen a lot of how Xiao Hua bullied others along the way. Moreover, he knew how powerful Xiao Hua's wishful staff was. Dragging Xiao Hua over was the wisest decision. "Junior brother Xiao, we will use our secret technique." Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua, whose gaze was already lingering on the top-grade water-type spirit stone, and urged him, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Oh yes." Xiao Hua reluctantly moved his gaze away from the spirit stone's brilliance. He swept his gaze and said with a smile, "Senior brother Li, if the three of us chase that giant away, we should be able to save Martial Uncle Che Hui, right?" "Naturally, the three of us will chase the giant away." Li Zongbao emphasized the words, "the three of us," as if to make Xiao Hua feel at ease. Come. Let this young master see who is stronger." Xiao Hua waved the wishful staff in his hand. His body slowly flew up, and he shouted at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, "Senior brothers, help me." "All right." Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao waved their hands in extreme boredom. At the same time, they waved their left hand and waved it towards Xiao Hua's back. In their right hand, the piercing Immortal whip and the universe ring were also brought out. Each flashed brilliantly as they smashed towards the giant. Roar! When the giant saw that his mace was unable to hit Che Hui, and that there were actually 3 little Foundation establishment stage insects coming over, he immediately looked up to the sky and roared. Dragging his mace, he took the initiative to rush towards Xiao Hua and the others. At this time, under the secret technique of Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, Xiao Hua waved his wishful staff and flew over. Woo! The giant's mace made a soul-stirring sound as it struck towards Xiao Hua's wishful staff. That huge mace was almost the same size as Xiao Hua. Although the mace had not yet approached, the suffocating sound of the wind was almost enough to send the tall and thin Xiao Hua flying. Moreover, the strange sounds coming from the spiked club were also faintly shaking Xiao Hua's soul. "Granny, this giant is really more powerful than before." Xiao Hua's soul not only had the secret technique of soul cultivation, but also a soul armor obtained from a sword cultivator. Although the quality was not high, it was better than nothing. The entire dark cloud shook slightly and became extremely stable again. Dang! The mace and the wishful staff collided. A wave of air that was even larger than the explosion of the fire talisman was produced from the two people, rushing rapidly in all directions. Even the giant's body that was bigger than a stalactite staggered with the impact. The mace in his hand was lifted high, almost falling out of his hand. Looking at Xiaohua again, his figure also rushed out with the wave of air, but Xiaohua's figure was like a swimming fish, drifting slightly in the wave of air. It was a very clever reason for the wave of air to be like a horsetail whisk, rushing towards the giant while shouting, "Fight!" Ah! The giant was stunned. The slight numbness in his arm dissipated and he had to wave his mace again. At this time, before Xiaohua's wishful staff hit, Xiao Mao's Chenkuan ring and Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip also broke through the wave of air and flew in front of the giant. Xiao Mao's Chenkuan ring aside, Li Zongbao's piercing immortal whip was famous among the cultivators. It was unknown how much swordsman's blood had been spilled on it. However, the giant didn't care about this famous magic treasure at all. The giant didn't even try to dodge the whip that was like a golden dragon. However, when the whip hit, the giant's shoulder shook as if he was trying to reduce the power of the immortal piercing whip. Perhaps it was some kind of secret technique. In short, a faint yellow light flashed on the giant's shoulder and caught the immortal piercing whip. Moreover, the force of the rebound surged and the immortal piercing whip shook slightly in the air. Chapter 25-21. Li Zongbao was dumbfounded. He knew that although his magic power was exhausted, the Holy Whip was a famous magic weapon of the Utopia faction. How could it be so weak? Looking at Xiao Mao's Heaven and Earth ring, it was even weaker. It also hit the giant's back, but the giant didn't even bother to shake it. The Heaven and Earth ring was like a tickle to the giant. He slid on the giant's shiny back and flew up into the air again. Just as Li Zongbao was dumbfounded, he felt a moment of trance. Then, a chill came from his heart, and an irresistible tyranny came out from the chill. Attack! Almost at the same time as Xiao Hua, Li Zongbao flew up and grabbed the immortal piercing whip with one hand. At the same time, his other hand took out a pill and swallowed it. A hot aura came from his meridians. The immortal piercing whip let out a roar like a dragon. As Li Zongbao waved it, the runes on the immortal piercing whip began to move. It broke free from the immortal piercing whip shackles and turned into a golden torrent. It rushed into the air and rushed towards the yellow giant's back. Dang! There was another sound. Unsurprisingly, Xiao Hua's body flew up again, and at the same time, the giant's body was hit by the wishful staff and took 2 steps back. At the same time, the golden light of the holy whip broke through the airwaves from the 2 weapons and hit the giant's back. Humph! The giant let out a deep sound from its nose. Its back shook slightly, and another wave of yellow light flashed. Bang! The golden light of the holy whip scattered the light, but the golden light of the holy whip was also annihilated. Looking at the back of the giant, there was a faint trace of blood slowly appearing. Old man, eat my whip again. Seeing that the holy whip didn't work, Li Zongbao's body glowed again, and he was about to activate his magic power again. Senior Li, use the secret method to help me. Xiao Hua saw the coldness in Li Zongbao's eyes and hurriedly shouted. At this time, Xie Hui had enough strength to deal with the giant wolf alone. He always paid attention to the movements of Li Zongbao and the others. Seeing that Li Zongbao was about to fight, he hurriedly shouted, Li Zongbao, calm your mind. It seemed to be a secret technique of the Utopia faction. Xiao Hua didn't feel anything when he heard the voice, but it was like a thunderclap in Li Zongbao's ears. Li Zongbao was shocked, and a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. Then, he waved his hand and took back the celestial piercing whip. Senior Martial Brother Li, quickly use your secret technique to help me. Xiao Hua shouted hysterically. This old man is too powerful. All right. Li Zongbao silently waved the piercing fairy whip. At this time, the brilliance of the piercing fairy whip was not as arrogant as before. Instead, it was as light as the wind. At the same time, Li Zongbao waved his left arm. Xiao Hua's figure soared into the sky and the staff in his hand smashed down. Old man, eat my staff. Woo! The staff carried a strong wind and smashed down like a mountain. Ding ding dang dang, there was a burst of chaotic sounds. Xiao Hua's heavenly staff technique was unleashed. He was like a fish in water under the wolf tooth staff. On one hand, he used the heavy wolf tooth staff to hit the giant. On the other hand, he could use the power of the wolf tooth staff to counterattack the giant. Although the giant's technique of using the wolf tooth staff was perfect, and even the control of the power of his arms was unparalleled in the Dawn Rain continent, he encountered Xiao Hua, a cultivator who was the nemesis of giants. What was the result? In just half a meal's time, the giant's bones were soft and his muscles were numb. The yellow brilliance of his body gradually flashed frequently. Hee, this giant with illusory sword cultivation is nothing more than this. Xiaohua sneered. He suddenly raised the wolf-tooth staff and shouted, "Eat my staff again!" "Xiao, you are." When he heard that Xiaohua's surname was Xiao, the giant's face changed greatly. It seemed that the matter that had been uncertain for a long time finally had an answer. He waved the wolf-tooth staff and dragged it backward. He no longer paid attention to the crowd. He spread his feet and fled into the depths of the karst cave. The twisting buttocks and the fear of turning back in panic were not much different from the previous giants who were scared away by Xiaohua. Seeing that the giant had escaped, Li Zongbao was about to urge Xiaohua to chase after him. But Xiaohua trembled slightly in mid-air. His arms hung down weakly, and he sat cross-legged in mid-air. Obviously, he was exhausted. Sigh, forget it. Li Zongbao knew that Xiaohua was exhausted again. He sighed and looked at Xiehui. Without the threat of the giant, Xiehui was able to deal with the beast cultivator with the giant wolf easily. However, at the same time, the weakness of a Dao cultivator's weak body was exposed. Although he urged his magic power and used the power of magic to block the demonic weapon, his forehead was still sweating. He was even more limp and numb than Xiaohua. Even when he was flying, he was still panting. Looking at the giant wolf, although it was moving slower, its momentum was still as strong as a rainbow. Every time it attacked, it would try to get close to Xiehui. Needless to say, how could Xiehui dare to let the giant wolf get close to him? He used his horsetail whisk and magic arts from time to time to block the demonic weapon, the sky piercer halberd. At the same time, he also used the confinement technique and the fireball technique. However, the giant wolf seemed to be guarding against Xiaohua. It didn't dare to get too close to him. It only destroyed Xiehui's magic arts and slowly approached him. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Xiehui sighed and looked at Li Zongbao and the others. His body floated up and flew towards the karst cave opposite of Li Zongbao. At the same time, he took out an elixir and swallowed it. Roar! When the giant wolf saw that Xiehui was actually escaping, it couldn't help but roar. The sky piercer suddenly left its hand and stabbed towards Xiehui's back. The sharp sound of the wind made it impossible for Xiehui to not turn around to face the enemy. It was also at this moment that the giant wolf tilted its head and spat out two huge wind blades from its mouth. It charged aggressively towards Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. This guy actually didn't dare to provoke Xiaohua, who had his eyes closed. However, it wanted to target Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao. The wind blades stirred the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the air and became bigger and bigger. The sharp wind blades cut through the air and made a strange sound. It sounded like the sobbing of an abandoned woman or the sobbing of the night rain. "You're courting death." Xiaohua, who had his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. He waved his hand and seemed to be forming some kind of seal. Along with a wave of spiritual energy, a stream of primordial water sprayed out from the top of Xiaohua's head like a fountain. The moment the primordial water appeared, it immediately turned into turbulent waves and quickly covered the entire karst cave. Splash! The clear sound of water splashing could be heard. It was as if a small fish had jumped out of the water and was wagging its tail happily. A wave of water splashed out from the surging waves, blocking between the wind blade and Li Zongbao. The extremely sharp wind blade seemed to be able to cut through the void. However, when the wind blade silently entered the innate primordial water, not even a drop of innate primordial water appeared. Not even a bubble could be formed, and it immediately disappeared without a trace. This is... The giant wolf originally didn't care. Although Xiaohua's primordial water quickly blocked the space, he only thought that it was because of the rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, when the wind blade silently disappeared, his face slightly changed and he hurriedly swept out with his spiritual sense. However, when his spiritual sense came into contact with the primordial water, he immediately felt that something was wrong. He hurriedly retracted his spiritual sense and shouted in shock, "This is primordial water?" However, even though he reacted quickly, a trace of his spiritual sense was still swallowed by the primordial water. How is this possible? The giant wolf's eyes turned and looked at the seemingly endless primordial water gushing out and covering the surrounding space. Even where his eyes could see, there were faint illusions in every drop of primordial water. He couldn't help but groan. That's right, other people would only have a few drops of primordial water, or even one drop. However, they would use the primordial water to stimulate the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth. How could they be as extravagant as Xiaohua? Every drop of primordial water was the real primordial water? Looking at Xiehui, he quickly waved his horsetail whisk and forcefully blocked the giant wolf sky piercer. Then, he saw an azure brilliance like the Milky Way hanging upside down in front of him. He was immediately shocked, but he was also lucky. He knew that this was definitely not the doing of the giant wolf. He hurriedly turned to look at Xiaohua and the others. When he heard the giant wolf scream, he hurriedly retracted his spiritual sense and didn't even look at the primordial water. This primordial water was even more useful to cultivators. In a situation where he didn't have any defensive measures, he definitely wouldn't provoke this primordial water. Since you didn't even leave when I asked you to, then don't leave. Xiaohua sneered. The hidden Buddha Saraira waved a Buddha seal and the surging primordial water suddenly boiled, shooting out giant wolves from everywhere. Ha ha ha. It's just primordial water. Why should I be afraid? The giant wolf's heroic spirit soared to the sky. He waved his sky piercer, and like Xiaohua's wishful staff, it formed a temporary safe space around him, blocking all the splashing primordial water outside. Humph. Xiaohua didn't refute at all. He gradually urged the primordial water to separate the giant wolf and Xiehui, while he and Li Zongbao were separated in another place. Li Zongbao frowned, but since the entire primordial water was controlled by Xiaohua, it didn't matter where Xiaohua was. Sure enough, Xiehui stood in midair for a moment and understood Xiaohua's intention. After a short rest, he urged his spiritual power and threw the horsetail whisk in his hand. The horsetail whisk turned into a comet and shot towards the giant wolf. Dang! The horsetail whisk collided with the halberd. Although the horsetail whisk looked very light, it contained the spiritual power of Chu Hui, an early gold core stage cultivator. Once it collided with the halberd, it immediately emitted a strong brilliance, causing the halberd to stagnate for a moment. There were only a few strands, and each strand had rushed into the weak spot. Ha! The giant wolf roared and waved the sky piercer, cutting off the threads of the primordial water. However, at the moment when it was cut, a few drops still fell into the defense of the sky piercer. Chapter 25-22. The giant wolf hastily moved his body. However, Chu Hui's horsetail whisk came again. The giant wolf had no choice but to wave his Fangtian halberd again. Just as he was distracted, the drop of innate primordial water landed on his feet. A series of sizzling sounds rang out, and black light and light smoke appeared on the giant wolf's feet. However, this light smoke was unable to withstand the Xiantian true water, and was instantly corroded. After a short while, the light and smoke finally disappeared, and the giant wolf's eyes flashed with shock and pain. Then, the giant wolf looked around and felt regretful. If it wasn't for the killing intent in his heart, he would have escaped from this karst cave a long time ago. At this moment, the innate primordial water had trapped him and the young man who controlled the water was on the other side. Even if he wanted to kill the young man, it would be impossible. Just now, he was thinking about how to kill Chu Hui. Now he was thinking about how to escape. The giant wolf was a beast cultivator. However, he didn't have Li Chengxiu's protective talisman, and he didn't have the hands of a nascent soul realm cultivator. Facing Chu Hui's attack and Xiaohua's innate primordial water, he was helpless. After Chu Hui disturbed him a few more times and a few drops of innate primordial water corroded his body, the giant wolf's eyes flashed with desperation. Woo! The giant wolf raised his head and howled. His body started to emit a black brilliance and light smoke. When the brilliance covered him, a giant wolf shape appeared in mid-air. Before the innate primordial water landed, the giant wolf opened his mouth and spat out a black pearl the size of a thumb. As soon as the pearl appeared, it stirred up a huge gust of wind. However, the gust of wind only raged within the innate primordial water. Once it touched the innate primordial water, it turned invisible. The gust of wind stirred around the giant wolf shape and supported the innate primordial water. Although the innate primordial water was slowly pressing down, it was able to maintain the giant wolf shape and prevent it from being corroded. Oh! Although Xiaohua raised his eyebrows, he wasn't too surprised. He still formed a Buddhist seal and urged the innate primordial water to attack the giant wolf's gust of wind. As for Xie, he looked a little embarrassed. However, he also used his horsetail whisk to hit the wind again and again. Boom! Under the joint attack of the two, the giant wolf could no longer endure it. Its slight hesitation was also shattered. The thumb-sized pearl suddenly exploded, and an awe-like hurricane was formed from the pearl, piercing straight into the primordial water. Oh! This time, Xiaohua was truly astonished. That hurricane seemed to have materialized. It was sharp and extremely fast, piercing through the innate true water that he had set up. Moreover, the tail of the hurricane, where it was rotating, was also rapidly expanding. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded into a hurricane passage that was several feet wide. Roar! The giant wolf let out a low roar, and its body flashed with light. At the same time, it rapidly shrank and rushed into the hurricane passage. Keep! Xiaohua hurriedly activated his true water and tried his best to shatter the passageway. However, this hurricane passage was abnormally tough. Although Xiaohua had shrunk the passage by a bit, it was still impossible to shatter it. Damn it! At this time, Xiaohua was also regretting. He had placed the giant wolf and Xie together while he hid in another place. The path that the giant wolf rushed out of was in the opposite direction of him. If he was close, he could have used the wishful staff to kill the giant wolf. Unfortunately, he was not close. Open! Xiaohua shouted. He saw that the innate primordial water near Xie had a crack that led to the outside of the karst cave. Xie really wanted to use his horsetail whisk to hit the giant wolf's tail. When he saw that, he immediately activated his magical treasure and rushed out of the innate primordial water. He rushed in the direction that the giant wolf had flown out of the innate primordial water. He wanted to stop the giant wolf before it rushed out of the innate primordial water. However, he was still too slow. When he caught up with it, the giant wolf had already rushed out of the innate primordial water and rushed into one of the karst caves. Xie did not hesitate. He did not even turn his head and chased after it. Looking at his speed, he was still faster than the giant wolf that had lost its inner core. If there were no accidents, killing the giant wolf would not be a problem. Seeing that Xie had chased after the giant wolf, Xiaohua waved his hand and activated a spell. The innate primordial water was slowly sucked into the innate primordial water. Big brother, Xiao Mao saw that the azure innate primordial water was slowly decreasing. He quickly said in a low voice, "What is it?" Xiaohua replied, Is this really innate primordial water?" Xiao Mao hesitated. "Why? Is it useful to you?" Xiaohua did not answer and asked directly. "And yes," Xiao Mao said honestly. "Little brother has a water attribute body. Master has a magical power that can only be cultivated by absorbing innate primordial water. Little brother has been looking for the whereabouts of this innate primordial water. I did not expect." "N." Xiaohua nodded. "How much do you need?" 749 drop, Xiao Mao replied in a low voice. After all, this was a huge number. His master said that he only needed 7 drops to learn the magical power. N. Xiaohua nodded. He knew clearly that most of the magical powers on the Xiaoyu continent had 6 as the limit. The water magical power taught by Xuanyan actually had 7 levels. It was obviously not bad. Where is your magical weapon? Xiaohua pointed with his finger. A thin stream of innate primordial water flew out and landed in front of Xiao Mao. Here! Xiao Mao was overjoyed. He quickly took out a square jade bottle. Xiaohua saw this and his expression did not change. The thin stream of innate primordial water slowly fell into the jade bottle. After a while, the thin stream of innate primordial water stopped. Xiaohua said, "This is 98 drops. Take it back and give it to your master." "Yes, thank you, big brother." Xiao Mao's face was filled with ecstasy. He quickly took out a strange yellow talisman and pasted it on the jade bottle. A yellow light flashed and the jade bottle returned to its normal appearance. Xiao Mao carefully kept it in his storage pouch. "Big brother Li, do you want it?" Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao with a smile. "I don't have it." Li Zongbao swung the immortal piercing whip in his hand. Golden light shot out in all directions. "I only need this immortal piercing whip." Sigh, Xiaohua sighed in his heart. He kept all the innate primordial water into the clear water bottle. Xiaohua. Li Zongbao looked at Xiaohua and suddenly said, I'm afraid you have too many tricks up your sleeve. You must not have too many tricks up your sleeve. Thank you, big brother Li. Xiaohua bowed and said, I know what I'm doing. And although Li Zongbao said N, he shook his head slightly and said, I have to reconsider your words. Ha ha ha, big brother Li. Do whatever you want. Xiaohua laughed and said. Then, he looked at the direction Xie Hui went and asked, Do we still need to chase after him? No need. Li Zongbao said indifferently. That beast cultivator spat out his inner core and exploded it. What other tricks can he have? If Martial Uncle Xie Hui can't even deal with this. As he was speaking, he saw a divine perception sweep over from afar. It was Xie Hui who flew over excitedly. Greetings, Martial Uncle Xie Hui. Xiaohua and the others didn't dare to be slow and hurriedly bowed. Get up. Xie Hui waved his hand. He didn't have the attitude of a senior and hurriedly returned the greeting. I still have to thank you today. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been able to kill Liang Qi. I would have been lucky if I could have escaped safely. I don't dare. Xiaohua still had some impression of Xie Hui. He smiled apologetically and said, It's all Martial Uncle's credit. I don't dare to take credit for it. Hee little friend Xiao, that day in Tai Ching Sex Hao realm, I already knew that you would have great achievements in the future. Today, I see that it's true. It's only been a few years. Not only have you reached the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, your methods are also very powerful. You scared the giant away with great strength and even used a rare method to force the wolf cultivator to explode his inner core. This, even my Zongbao can't achieve this. When Xiaohua heard this, he hurriedly waved his hand and said, Martial Uncle is overpraising me. It's all thanks to Martial Brother Li Zongbao. If he didn't have the secret technique, I wouldn't have been able to combine his and Xiao Mao's magic power. I wouldn't have been able to have such great strength. That was a giant with the strength of an illusory sword. I wouldn't have fought it head-on. When Xie Hui saw Li Zongbao's expression, he smiled and extended his hand. In his hand was a storage pouch. He passed it to Xiaohua and said, This is Liang Qi's storage pouch. It should belong to little friend Xiao. No need. Xiaohua looked around at the supreme grade spirit stones and said with a smile, It's great that I have this. Haha. Xie Hui passed the storage pouch to Xiaohua and said, Take a look at it first. Oh, Xiaohua was stunned. He took the storage pouch and scanned it with his divine thought. He smiled and said, So this giant wolf didn't fight for nothing. The spirit stones inside should have been collected in the flowing ice valley. You can take it. Xie Hui waved his hand and said, If I take it, I will feel uneasy. How about this? Xiaohua waved his hand and took half of the water-type spirit stones and the sky piercer. He smiled and said, The demonic weapon is useless to Martial Uncle, so I'll take it. The rest are Martial Uncle's. If Martial Uncle didn't fight with this wolf cultivator, I wouldn't have been able to kill him. Alright. Xie Hui didn't decline anymore. He took the storage pouch and looked at Li Zongbao worriedly. He said in a low voice, Zongbao. Success depends on the celestial piercing whip. Failure depends on the celestial piercing whip. This celestial piercing whip is a famous magic weapon of the Utopia faction. Your cultivation level hasn't reached that level yet. Don't use it by force. If the celestial piercing whip backfires, you will have a hard time. Yes, I understand. Li Zongbao bowed and said, Master has already given me the secret technique. It should be able to restrain the celestial piercing whip's backfire. That senior brother Hangfeng of mine. Sometimes, he is too headstrong and cares about his face too much. Xie Hui sighed and said, You have to know that those who are too headstrong break easily, while those who are soft will never be defeated. Sometimes, you can't be too headstrong. Li Zongbao was silent. He didn't reply like before. All right, Chu Hui shook his head slightly. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He tilted his head slightly as if he was listening to something. Immediately after, joy appeared on his face and he hurriedly said, Cool Breeze Valley's Su Bo actually killed Black Phoenix Sword Sex LV Jing. Right now, He's teaming up with Changbai Sex Li Feiyu to hunt down Void Heaven Sword Sex Qin Mu Ming. This old man chased away that unknown giant and killed Gorilla Mountain's Liang Qi. Once this old man and the two Dao friends kill Qin Mu Ming, our Dao Sex Flowing Ice Valley battle will be a great victory. That's right. What about the battle between the Foundation Establishment cultivators? Chapter 25-23. Only then did Chu Hui remember those Foundation Establishment disciples. All right, Senior Uncle knows. We will also win. Li Zongbao replied without hesitation. Great. Chu Hui clapped his hands and said, You all can return for now. After we kill Qin Mu, I will send you a message. With that, Chu Hui's face was filled with joy. He executed his flying technique and flew in one direction. Let's go. Li Zongbao took a look and flew back to the karst cave. Tsk tisk. Xiao Hua smacked his lips and smiled apologetically. Senior brother Li, there are so many supreme-grade spirit stones here. Don't you? Hee, you can harvest as much as you want. Li Zongbao raised his eyebrows and stood in mid-air. I will wait for you here. All right. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, Xiao Mao, go. Yes. Xiao Mao heard and quickly flew to the front of the stone wall. However, no matter how fast he was not as fast as Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua had already taken out his wishful staff and smashed it on the side of the supreme-grade spirit stone. Xiao Mao knew that time was tight and did not dare to delay. He also took out his universe ring and smashed it on the side of the supreme-grade spirit stone. However, when he had just harvested 2 spirit stones, he realized that something was wrong. It turned out that other than the spirit stones on the surface, there was nothing deeper. Even when he smashed a few feet with his universe ring, it was still empty. This. Xiao Mao hurriedly raised his head. Just as he was about to shout, he saw Xiao Hua's gloomy face. Xiao Hua had excavated the jade essence in Spring Gold Mountain. He had just harvested a piece and realized that something was wrong. He had also smashed a deep hole. The spirit stone veins in Flowing Ice Valley have long been excavated. There are only a few pieces left. That's why Sky Patrol City reported this place to the meeting hall like 7 Extremes Mountain and Spring Gold Mountain. Li Zongbao said calmly. Before we came, Master had already explained the pros and cons. This place is just a kill. Yes, to test the strength of the swordsmen in Flowing Ice Valley. It would be best if we could kill all of them. As for the spirit stones, this is an abandoned vein. Even if Junior Brother harvested all the spirit stones here, I'm afraid it would not be comparable to the spirit stones in the storage bag. Although a fly is small, it's still meat. Xiao Hua looked at the sparkling spirit stone with reluctance and said with a groan. A fly is meat, but if there is a big piece of fat meat outside, this fly can't be considered as fat meat. Li Zongbao said coldly. That's right. Xiao Hua slaps his forehead. Those sword cultivators' storage pouches definitely have more spirit stones than the ones here. Quick, Xiao Mao, let's chase after him. Ai! Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua excitedly flying around and couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Although spirit stones weren't bad, to treat spirit stones so seriously, it really didn't match Xiao Hua's cultivation. Then, Li Zongbao was a little envious. It seemed that having such a hobby was better than having no hobby at all. Okay. However, this thought only flashed in his mind for a moment before it was immediately killed. The parting feelings treasure mirror really needed to be parting feelings. These rather mundane hobbies had long been cleaned up by Li Zongbao. Xiao Hua excitedly rushed out of the karst cave, but immediately stopped at the entrance with a bitter expression. Not to mention finding those cultivators who were chasing after the swordsman, Xiao Hua didn't even have a clue how to return to the karst cave from before. In front of him, the tangled and complicated karst cave that was like a spider web was simply 100 times, 1,000 times more ferocious than those giants and wolf cultivators. Senior Marshal Brother Li, please go first. Xiao Hua very politely stood in midair and raised his hand, inviting Li Zongbao to go first. Humph! The corners of Li Zongbao's mouth faintly curled into a smile. Although he was extremely unwilling to secretly laugh in his heart, he still couldn't help but laugh. Which cultivator who could step into the Qi refinement realm wasn't an outstanding figure among the mundane world? Moreover, Since they were able to cultivate into the Foundation establishment realm, they were truly dragons and phoenixes among men. Their aptitude and insight made it difficult for others to catch up to them. Not to mention the ability to remember things with a single glance, this ability to recognize directions. Even a slightly intelligent child could do it. However, Xianxia, who was able to easily kill a middle-stage core formation cultivator, was actually so weak in this aspect that it was hard to believe. This guy's divine sense is no small matter. If it wasn't for the fact that divine sense can't be used here, I'm afraid he would have already run away. A trace of emotion flashed in Li Zongbao's eyes. After carefully identifying for a moment, he flew in a certain direction without hesitation. Xiao Mao, look at the direction Senior Marshal Brother Li is flying in. Is there anything special? Xiaohua really couldn't see the difference between this karst cave and other karst caves, so he couldn't help but ask. Xiao Mao smiled and said, "This little brother also doesn't know. However, this little brother remembers the path we came from. Although this karst cave doesn't lead to the direction we came from, I feel that it should lead to the direction the swordsmen fled in." Really? Xiaohua looked at the endless stalactites in disbelief. No matter what, he couldn't see any difference. Damn it, this young master has the hand of karma. Xiaohua was extremely indignant. This young master can even sense the karma of the world. There's no reason why this young master can't understand this, right? However, Xiaohua, who could sense his own crisis, Cui Hongshan and Dui Qiming's crisis, and even Xiao Mao's crisis, couldn't make sense of these minor details. Sure enough, after flying for less than an hour, under Li Zongbao's lead, sometimes left, sometimes right, sometimes up, and sometimes down, there was a rumbling sound in their ears. Moreover, the rich water element Heaven-Earth Ling Qi in the karst cave also became more and more viscous, making people's skin feel moist. Hearing the sound, Xiaohua really admired Li Zongbao from the bottom of his heart. For him, this absolutely couldn't be so easy. It was like letting Li Zongbao kill that wolf cultivator Liang Qi. Just as he was thinking, several third-grade swordsmen fled in panic from the front. "Where do you think you're going?" Seeing this, Li Zongbao's figure floated up, and the immortal piercing whip in his hand was about to wave again. Unfortunately, when those swordsmen saw Xiaohua and the others, they immediately turned pale with fright. Their figures turned, and they fled toward a fork in the karst cave, simply faster than a shooting star. Li Zongbao's expression didn't change, as if sword cultivators should be like this when they see him. Just as he was about to chase after them, a dozen or so utmost happiness faction disciples rushed over from where the sword cultivators came from. When those disciples saw Li Zongbao, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. Most of them cupped their hands and chased after those sword cultivators. There were also 3 late-stage Foundation establishment disciples who stayed behind. They stepped forward and greeted, "Senior Brother Li." "I don't dare." Li Zongbao hurriedly returned the greeting and said, "I've only just reached the late stage of Foundation establishment. How can I be addressed by 3 senior brothers like this?" Alas, if we're talking about age, we're naturally Senior Brother Li's senior brothers. However, even if we've already reached the late stage of Foundation establishment, compared to Senior Brother Li's magical powers, we're really ashamed. If you don't deserve the title of senior brother, then we can only call you Martial Uncle. The oldest-looking old man said very sincerely. That's right. Another old man also stepped forward and cupped his hands. Previously, we were still thinking that if it weren't for the help of Senior Brother Li and these 2 fellow cultivators, I'm afraid that over 10,000 of US disciples would have been buried in this flowing ice valley one by one. Greetings to the 2 junior brothers Xiao. The 3rd disciple stepped forward with a smile and said to Xiaohua and Xiao Mao, "We disciples will always remember the help of the 2 fellow cultivators in our hearts. This is all Senior Brother Li's credit." Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hands. With his special permission from the conference hall, I was able to get together with junior brother Xiao Mao. Even coming to Flowing Ice Valley was under Senior Brother Li's command. We dare not claim credit. This disciple was a disciple of the Utopia faction. When he saw that Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect and Xiao Mao of the Xuanyan Order were so humble and did not compete with Li Zongbao for credit, he was even more delighted. No matter how he looked at them, they were pleasing to the eye. You 2 fellow cultivators don't need to be humble. The joint attack of the 2 of you and Senior Brother Li was not only seen by the disciples of the Utopia faction, but also by the disciples of the Chongbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley. If there's a contribution from the disciples of the Utopia faction, then there's definitely a contribution from the Imperial Thunder Sect and the Xuanyan Order. When we return to the Sky Patrol City, we'll definitely report the truth. This great contribution will definitely belong to the three of you. Xiao Mao was overjoyed and bowed. Senior brother, you're praising us too much. As they spoke, Li Zongbao had more or less understood the situation of the battle. Just as he thought, the sword cultivators were defeated like a landslide. Under the pursuit of the Taoist sect cultivators, they could only rely on their familiarity with the terrain of Flowing Ice Valley to escape the fate of total annihilation. But even so, when Xiao Hua chased the giant away, Chu Hui killed Liang Qi, and found this place, nearly 30% of the sword cultivators were killed. 30% of the sword cultivators, that was close to 4,000 people. It was inevitable that the elder of the Utopia faction was excited. Not bad. Li Zongbao smiled and nodded. Junior brothers, you've worked hard. I just came over from Uncle Chu Hui's place. Uncle Chu Hui fought against the giant and the wolf cultivator alone. Just when we lured the giant away, Uncle Chu Hui unleashed his invincible power and killed the wolf cultivator Liang Qi. In addition, when the giant saw that things were not going well, he was so scared that he fled in panic. Great! When the three disciples heard this, their faces lit up with joy. At this time, several disciples in the late stage of the Foundation establishment stage flew over. They were the disciples of the Tai Bai faction and the Cool Breeze Valley. When they met, they exchanged pleasantries and expressed their gratitude. However, it was obvious that after the disciples of the two factions greeted Li Zongbao, they were more affectionate with Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao. They even, in their words, they gave the credit to Xiao Hua and Xiao Mao. Haha. Xiao Hua was secretly happy. He knew that the two factions didn't want the Utopia faction to take all the credit. However, he just smiled and pushed Xiao Mao forward. Although Xiao Mao's reputation was not as good as Li Zongbao's, he was also smooth in dealing with people, almost similar to Cui Hongshan. In just a moment, he had gradually become the focus of everyone's attention. Oh! At this time, Li Zongbao suddenly raised his hand and said, "Fellow cultivators, please be quiet." Chapter 25-24. When everyone heard this, they immediately shut their mouths. Li Zongbao suddenly flew several feet to the side. He clapped his hands and took out a strange-looking jade pendant. Under the influence of his magic power, the jade pendant turned into a stream of light and rushed out. Martial Uncle Chu Hui seems to have sent a message, but because this place is too far away. Xiao Mao explained. Sure enough, in less than half a cup of tea's time, 2 streams of light flew back from afar and landed in Li Zongbao's hands. When Li Zongbao's spiritual sense entered the flying message talisman, he suddenly understood. He raised his head and looked at the eager crowd. He smiled and said, "The Battle of Flowing Ice Valley has ended. Martial Uncle Chu Hui, Martial Uncle Li Feiyu of Chongbai Sect, and Martial Uncle Subo of Cool Breeze Valley joined forces and killed Qin Muming of Void Heaven Sword School. However, Martial Uncle Li Feiyu was killed by Qin Muming's last attack." When everyone heard the first half of the sentence, they were about to cheer. However, the last sentence destroyed their excited expressions. Everyone from Chongbai Sect showed anger on their faces. "Let's go. We'll kill the remaining sword cultivators and avenge Martial Uncle Li." Okay. All the disciples of Chongbai Sect agreed in unison and sent out requests to the disciples of Utmost Happiness Faction and Cool Breeze Valley. "Let's go. Kill the sword cultivators." The disciples of Utmost Happiness Faction and Cool Breeze Valley were duty-bound. However, at this moment, a faint rumbling sound came from afar. At first, it was extremely soft, like the sound of thunder in the sky, but this sound was continuous, one sound after another, coming closer and closer from afar. What was special was that the vibration spread very quickly. It had long been affected by the changes in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The rich water spiritual energy trembled rapidly. As the sound approached, it almost exploded. This is bad. Others might not know the depth of the sound, but Xiao Hua came out from the spiritual stone vein of Spring Gold Mountain. His first reaction was that someone had activated the defensive array of the spiritual stone vein of Flowing Ice Valley. Spring Gold Mountain. Xiao Hua's expression changed greatly. He gritted his teeth and shouted these 3 words. Xiaohua didn't need to explain too much. Everyone's face turned ashen. Everyone present. Who didn't know about the tens of thousands of sword cultivators and sword cultivators that died at Spring Gold Mountain? Quick! Everyone no longer talked about taking revenge for Li Feiyu. They all ran towards the place they thought was the safest. Don't rush! Li Zongbao climbed up and shouted, "Panic is the most important thing right now. If you trust me, the 3 of you will follow behind us." After saying that, he didn't care about what the others thought and took the lead to rush out. The bystanders were in a state of panic. While they were deciding between themselves and Li Zongbao, Xiaohua did not hesitate to follow Li Zongbao. Since Xiaohua had left, even if Xiao Mao didn't trust Li Zongbao, he trusted Xiaohua. Naturally, he would fly away. The battle between the 3 of them was so eye-catching that it left a deep impression on the onlookers. Seeing that the 3 of them didn't panic and rushed into a karst cave, the disciples of the Utopia faction also followed them. Then, no one left. The disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley also followed them closely. Everyone tried their best to activate their true core strength. Their magic power was completely spent on the flying technique. They wanted to leave this underground mine as soon as possible. However, although they were flying extremely fast, the sound of the explosion was even faster. It was just like Xiaohua's thunder riding technique in the sky earlier. The crackling sound and the rumbling sound of the earth shaking and mountains shaking quickly caught up to them. Seeing a huge impact catching up to them from behind, even though they had already expected it and had already activated their protective spells to resist, there was a loud woo sound. The impact threw everyone high up into the cave. The true essence in everyone's meridians suddenly condensed for a moment, and they couldn't mobilize the slightest bit of magic power. Fortunately, it was only for a moment. The true core strength could flow smoothly again. Everyone struggled to stand in mid-air. Even Xiaohua was astonished. The impact was really too big. Even with his cultivation, he was also struggling to resist it. Just as they were struggling to stand, a violent rumbling sound came from all around them. It was as if a pair of big hands were shaking the 1,000-kilometer flowing ice valley. Xiaohua and the others, who had just stabilized their bodies, were once again affected by the violent tremors. One by one, they fell to the ground in a sorry state. Fortunately, although these cultivators' bodies hadn't been specially tempered, they were still much stronger than ordinary people. They didn't have to worry about being injured. Pa, 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 a series of explosions sounded in the air, following the violent tremors. However, the tremors were really strong, making it easy for everyone to ignore them. This is... Xiaohua also fell to the ground. A light blue brilliance just happened to flash above his head. The pa sound was like a bolt of lightning piercing through the air. Xiaohua's gaze swept over and saw it. He was very shocked and whispered in a low voice. Li Zongbao was right next to Xiaohua. His eyes also lit up. He immediately raised his head and looked left and right. He saw that the pa sound was continuous. At the same time, the violent tremors continued forward. Even in the rock wall 100 feet away, the light blue brilliance and the pa sound were also produced in the rock wall. What puzzled everyone was that after the frightening tremors and the impact that pushed all the cultivators down from the sky, it was as if nothing had happened. Everything returned to normal. If it weren't for the rumbling sounds in the distance and the fact that everyone fell to the ground in a sorry state, everyone would think that it was just a dream. What's going on? Xiaohua scratched his head. He didn't believe that such a huge thing would have no effect. It was actually not a plot against the cultivators. Senior Li. Xiao Mao was also surprised. He crawled up from the ground and whispered, "Was the movement just now flowing Ice Valley's forbidden technique?" Li Zongbao shook his head slightly and said, "This flowing ice valley has been in the hands of the enemy for many years. Even if there was a forbidden technique, it would have been destroyed by the swordsmen long ago. So, this forbidden technique must be targeted at the cultivators of our Dao sect?" Xiao Mao's eyebrows knitted together. "It should be, right?" Li Zongbao activated his true core strength. When the true core strength circulated in his meridians, he didn't see any abnormalities. This was indeed abnormal, so he couldn't help but answer with some hesitation. "Oh no!" Xiaohua suddenly shouted. "What's wrong? Junior Li, what did you think of?" Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao asked hurriedly. Xiao Hua's expression changed. The guarding disciples of this flowing ice valley are from the Void Heaven Sword faction and the Black Phoenix Sword faction. Isn't Qin Jian from the Void Heaven Sword faction? Qin Mu Ming, who was just killed by Martial Uncle Chu Hui, should be Qin Jian's blood relative, right? Xiao Hua explained. Yes, so what? Li Zongbao still didn't understand. The other disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction also gathered around. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. That day, Tu Hong from the Sky Patrol City killed tens of thousands of people at Golden Spring Mountain. His reputation spread and he became the #1 hero of our Dao sect. He suppressed Qin Jian's fame. Senior Li, think about it. How could Qin Jian, who cherishes his reputation, let go of such an excellent opportunity? Since he could break into our Sky Patrol City and kill Tu Hong, I'm afraid he could turn this flowing ice valley into the second Golden Spring Mountain. Killing tens of thousands of swordsmen and cultivators should be his goal in this battle, right? Hiss. Li Zongbao hadn't experienced Golden Spring Mountain, so he definitely didn't think as deeply as Xiao Hua. After hearing Xiao Hua's words, he immediately gasped. That's right, this flowing ice valley has been in Qin Jian's hands for many years. He had already arranged everything. He was just waiting for the cultivators of our Dao sect to come and snatch it. As long as they snatched it, he could take advantage of the situation and kill the cultivators of our Dao sect, and those swordsmen in the underground of the flowing ice valley. In this way, not only could he kill Tu Hong, but he would also have more achievements than Tu Hong. Wouldn't he be more famous than before? But, Big Brother, Senior Li, Xiao Mao said in a low voice, we didn't do anything wrong. This guy must be guarding the exit. Li Zongbao's expression changed drastically. I'm afraid he destroyed all the karst caves just now and wanted to bury us here alive. Quick! The disciples of the Utopia faction heard this and became anxious. Let's quickly find the exit. Even if we have to risk our lives, we must rush out. Let's go! The disciples of the Changbai sect hurriedly activated their flying spell and rushed in the direction that Li Zongbao had flown to. Li Zongbao only hesitated for a moment before he hurriedly waved his hand and said, no matter what, let's find the exit first. Yes. Xiao Hua nodded, but he felt a little relieved. Others might not have the 5 elements escape spell or the ground escape spell, but he was not afraid. Even if there was a restrictive spell, he could use the rabbit spiritual talisman to break it. Even if this place was deep underground in the flowing ice valley, he could still escape underground. At most, he would knock Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao out. Everyone flew in a panic for a moment, and there were even more cultivators who were like headless flies scurrying around. When they saw Li Zongbao and the others, they were immediately overjoyed and flew up together with them. As the number of people gradually increased, everyone calmed down. It seemed that the situation was not as bad as they had imagined. The karst cave did not seem to have any changes, let alone collapse. However, just when everyone had calmed down, someone suddenly said in surprise, Not good. I's true core strength is about to be used up. Haha, you're just a foundation establishment stage cultivator. A cultivator from the Cool Breeze Valley laughed. He was about to mock I, but when he said that he turned pale with fright and said, Not good as expected, my true core strength is also rapidly depleting. Stop quickly. Li Zongbao checked a little and his face changed greatly. He hurriedly shouted. As Li Zongbao stopped in midair, the crowd of about hundreds of people also stopped in midair. It's not working, Senior Li. Xiao Mao said bitterly. Even if we stop in midair, our true core strength is still depleting. Chapter 25-25. Seeing this, Xiao Hua landed on the ground without hesitation and said happily, Everyone, come down quickly. If you don't use your magic power, your true core strength won't disappear mysteriously. As expected, when Li Zongbao and the others landed on the ground, the true core strength in their meridians stopped disappearing. Let's meditate quickly. Li Zongbao hurriedly ordered. Not good. A disciple of the Utopia faction shouted, We can't use our skills. If we do, our true core strength will disappear after the spiritual chi of heaven and earth enters our bodies. Spiritual chi of heaven and earth? Xiaohua suddenly realized and shouted, "Senior Brother Li, do you still remember the blue brilliance just now? I'm afraid the secret is here. In this karst cave, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth under the spirit stone vein can't be refined." Sure enough, although Xiaohua didn't dare to absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, the dense and almost moist water vapor from before had dried up a lot. "Qin Jian, that guy, is really cunning," Li Zongbao sighed. "He used this method to prevent us from using our magic power and absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. How can we be a match for a sword cultivator? He can kill a cultivator and protect a swordsman. His method is 100 times better than Tu Hong's." At this moment, Xiaohua, who was originally confident, was no longer confident in his heart. Since Qin Jian was after the cultivator's true core strength and not burying the karst cave, he might not be able to escape. Xiaohua's meridians were tough and wide, and his true core strength was absolutely incomparable to that of an ordinary cultivator. When he was flying just now, the true core strength he used was also extremely small, so he didn't notice it at that time. However, although the amount was small, it couldn't be produced by using his skills. If he used it little by little, it would be digested sooner or later. Thinking about this, Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He waved his hand and was about to take out the green spirit pill. However, a depressed voice was heard again. "Using the pill also doesn't work. It seems that when we were flying just now, we had already absorbed the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Now, using the pill can't produce true core strength at all. And when we used our skills, the true core strength in our meridians disappeared again." Damn it! Xiaohua bit his lips. This news indeed made him feel very helpless. The water element heaven and earth spirit chi in this flowing ice valley is poisonous. A disciple shouted loudly, his voice sounding somewhat hysterical. After all, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was the foundation of a Tao sect cultivator's cultivation. They were constantly absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and all their spells relied on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as well as their true yuan. If the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was poisonous, wouldn't that be a drastic measure? Even if they had miraculous spells and incomparable divine abilities, they were all like the moon in the water, flowers in the mirror. Qin Jian's arrangements are so vicious. Xiaohua sighed with emotion in his heart. This move was definitely more powerful than Tu Hong's that day. It directly knocked the Tao sect's cultivators down from the clouds and turned them into lambs waiting to be slaughtered by swordsmen. Fellow Taoists, let's hurry up and find the exit while we still have dermic powers in our bodies. Maybe we can escape. A Cool Breeze Valley disciple hurriedly shouted. He himself also wanted to rush into the air regardless of anything. Stop! Li Zongbao berated. If you want to live, then wait here first. Right now the most important thing is to stay calm. Senior Brother Li. That Cool Breeze Valley disciple sneered. We don't have Senior Brother Li's dermic powers. We can't hold on for a long time. When I's dermic powers are exhausted, then I'll be no different from Immortal. A sword cultivator can kill us with just a flick of his finger. How is your cultivation compared to a golden core master? Li Zongbao suddenly asked. That disciple was stunned and somewhat baffled. He asked in confusion, how can I compare to a golden core master? Yes, if a golden core master was here, wouldn't their dermic powers be affected? Li Zongbao said coldly. The golden core master's true yuan comes out from their golden core. That disciple hesitated for a moment before answering. Even if they absorb this poisonous water element heaven and earth spirit chi into their bodies, as long as their golden core doesn't release true yuan, they shouldn't be affected, right? What does Senior Brother Li mean? This junior brother is right. Li Zongbao nodded. A golden core master's golden core master must have a defense against this kind of poison. Even if they can't resist it, their dermic powers should be enough to support them to find the exit. However, since Qin Jian of the Void Heaven Sword School used such a method, wouldn't he wait at the exit? Ah! This logic wasn't too profound, but everyone was too frightened to think about it. They only wanted to rush out, but when they heard this, they couldn't help but be shocked. Not only that, even if Qin Jian didn't wait at the exit of the flowing ice valley, those swordsmen who had been beaten to a pulp by them would still be dead. Senior Brother Li, since we can't go to the exit, then what should we do? That Cool Breeze Valley disciple immediately asked for help. His eyes were as eager as the other disciples. In fact, most of the time, the so-called wise men or leaders were just like ordinary people, and no one could see anything unusual about them. It was only in such extreme situations, when others were panicking and losing their minds, that these people would show the difference. Xianxia was calm, but that was because he had the strength. Even if everyone in front of him had to die, he would definitely be the last one. He was even confident that he could rush to the exit under Li Zongbao's lead. However, if he had to lead this group of cultivators to rush out, he was a little hesitant. At this moment, a voice came from beside Xianxia. In my opinion, the most important thing for us is to avoid the danger and escape from Qin Jian's trap. We shouldn't look for the exit of the flowing ice valley. Xianxia looked to the side and saw Xiao Mao. Xiao Mao was biting his lips slightly. Although he looked confident, his eyes were still looking at Li Zongbao and Xiaohua. Obviously, he was still worried. That's right. Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, Junior brother Xiao is right. As long as we don't use our dermic powers, our true essence won't disappear. Even if swordsmen come, we won't be afraid for a while. There's no reason for us to walk into a trap. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, Xiao Mao received Li Zongbao's encouragement and said with courage, those swordsmen are scattered after being chased by us. They are also terrified. They might not dare to come to us and can only wait at the exit. We aren't in any danger right now. Not only that, Xiaohua said with a smile, I even suspect that the swordsmen in the flowing ice valley don't know about Qin Jian's trap. Those swordsmen who were chased by us are still running away. The swordsmen guarding the exit are from the Void Heaven Sword School. Li Zongbao was also surprised. However, he immediately realized and nodded. That's true. If those swordsmen knew about such a powerful backup plan, how could they fight so fiercely with us? They were also kept in the dark. Yes, everyone looked at Li Zongbao, Xiaohua, and Xiao Mao with admiration. Only Xiaohua smiled bitterly. If he hadn't been bait at Jinquan Mountain, how could he have seen it so clearly? Although Qin Jian wasn't as generous as Tu Hong, he wasn't lacking in scheming. We will first find a safe place. The disciple of the Utmost Happiness faction shouted, Senior Brother Li, we will listen to your arrangements. We will go wherever you say. Good. Li Zongbao waved his hand and said, we will only walk on the ground and don't use our true core strength. As he spoke, Li Zongbao looked in the direction and walked toward a karst cave. However, at this moment, Xiaohua grabbed Li Zongbao and said with a smile, Senior Brother Li, if you want to find a way out, I will definitely listen to you. However, if you want to find a dead end, Senior Brother Li, you can't compare to this little brother. Li Zongbao was slightly taken aback. At this moment, Xiaohua didn't hesitate to step forward. He didn't even try to identify him as he walked towards another cave. This. Li Zongbao only thought for a moment and followed Xiaohua without hesitation. When the others saw this, although they didn't trust Xiaohua, they still followed. What made everyone stunned was that in just the time it took to drink a cup of tea, they saw Xiaohua calmly walk straight. He was leading them to a dead end. Everyone looked at the karst cave that was thousands of feet in size. Except for a small entrance, there was no other way out. Everyone was really speechless. Big brother. You are really tall. Xiao Mao looked back at the karst cave entrance that was only about the height of a person. Compared to the other karst caves that were tens of feet in size, even if a swordsman passed by, he might not be able to see it. Hee, Xiaohua was embarrassed and said shyly, Big brother can only do so much. The rest will depend on you guys. Yes. Xiao Mao nodded. He looked at Li Zongbao and said, if nothing unexpected happens, we should be safe here for the next few days. Even if a swordsman finds this place, we have the ability to resist. However, this is just treating the symptoms and not the root cause. In my opinion, the second thing is to detoxify the poison. We need to find the poison in this water-type heaven and earth spirit qi. I agree with Junior Brother Xiao. Li Zongbao nodded and looked at the others. Junior Brother Xiao is right. A Changbai sect disciple agreed. However, whether there is something wrong with the water-type heaven and earth spirit qi, or whether there is poison in the water-type heaven and earth spirit qi, we are all guessing. Even whether it is Qin Jian lying in ambush outside is also our guess. Who cares if it is true or not? As long as we can find the reason for the disappearance of the true Yuan. The Cool Breeze Valley disciple said impatiently. Yes, which fellow Taoist knows how to detoxify and use poison? Li Zongbao raised his voice. I am not good at this and I have never heard of such a strange method. Seeing that everyone was silent, Xiaohua said, Senior Brother Li, regarding detoxification, I have some insights. You? Li Zongbao was really stunned. If it was anyone else who said that they knew how to use poison, Li Zongbao would not be surprised. However, it was Xiaohua who said it. He could not help but be surprised. He almost grabbed Xiaohua's hand and asked, Junior Brother Xiao, other than giving birth, what else can you not do? Chapter 25-26. Great! A disciple of the Utmost Happiness faction hurriedly said, How does Senior Brother Xiao explain this poison? I won't hide it from everyone. Xiaohua raised his voice. Just now, I've already taken the antidote pill, but it's useless. Of course, I have other ways to detoxify the poison that I haven't tried yet, so I can't say that it will definitely detoxify the poison, but I feel that this poison, I'm afraid it won't be easy to detoxify it, or even, this might not be the same poison. When Xiaohua's words came out, everyone was depressed, but there was still someone who hurriedly said, Senior Brother Xiao, if you have other ways, please try it quickly, it would be best if it works. Okay, I'll try it myself first. As Xiaohua spoke, he looked up at the cave entrance that was taller than a person and asked, Which fellow cultivator has a concealment array? How about covering this cave entrance? Xiaohua asked 3 times in a row, then a disciple of the Cool Breeze Valley whispered, I do have an array, but it's very crude, it might not be of any use. Fellow cultivator, please give me the array talisman and array disc, I'll set up the array for you. Xiaohua knew what that cultivator meant and said, That's great. When that disciple heard this, he hurriedly took out a few array talismans and array disc and handed them to Xiaohua. Xiaohua took them, looked at the jade slip, slightly pondered, and urged his magic power to set the array talisman down. He pointed his finger at the array disc, but with a flash of brilliance, the cave entrance was indeed blocked by the array. But Xiaohua's true core strength was also consumed a lot. Then, Xiaohua sat cross-legged at the entrance of the cave, waved his hand, and took out the green python's poison, preparing to use the antidote secret technique to fight poison with poison. However, when he was about to cast the spell on the snake poison, he hesitated again. Fighting poison with poison, you have to have poison in your body first. If you don't have poison and take the snake poison yourself, isn't that just courting death? After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua sighed and put away the snake poison. What that disciple of the Cool Breeze Valley said was reasonable. It might not be poisonous. How could he fight poison with poison? However, Xiaohua still didn't get up, slowly urging his cultivation method, carefully observing the changes in his true core strength. True core strength followed the urging of his cultivation method and slowly flowed in his meridians. Just as it started to flow, the true core strength in his body disappeared. There was no sign at all, or any other special situation. How strange. Xiaohua frowned as he pondered. It was not like he had never encountered anything that could devour true qi. Wasn't Mo Bao extremely powerful in the Mo Zhao Black Forest? Once the ink sand entered the meridians, it immediately blocked them. Even if it entered the dantian, the gold core would be corroded by the ink sand. However, the ink sand was a tangible object after all. How could it be like today? There were no clues at all? At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard outside the cave. It sounded like there were quite a number of people. Junior Brother Xiao, open the cave entrance. These footsteps belong to my Dao sect's disciples. Let them in. The more of us, the better. Li Zongbao and the others were in a predicament. No one knew what the poison was. The entire cave was quiet, and it was easy to hear the footsteps outside. Yes. Xiaohua took out the formation plate and activated his magic power. With a flash of brilliance, the entrance to the cave was revealed. Hey, there's a cave entrance here. A burst of noise immediately came over. Fellow cultivators, come in. Xiaohua walked out of the cave and saw a group of hundreds of people. He called out in a low voice. Senior brother from the Imperial Thunder sect. The sharp-eyed crowd immediately recognized Xiaohua, who had just fought with Li Zongbao against the enemy, and their faces showed joy. Immediately after, when everyone had entered the cave, Xiaohua once again covered the entrance of the cave. However, with this opening and closing of the cave, a lot of true essence disappeared. Alas, what kind of poison is this? When Xiaohua used the magic art, he was very careful to check it. However, he did not see anything unusual. The hundreds of people were the same as Xiaohua and the others. They were also a mix of the disciples of the Utmost Happiness faction, the Changbai sect, and the Cool Breeze Valley. Moreover, their thoughts were the same as Xiaohua and the others. However, they did not have any purpose and had not found a suitable place to hide. Alas, don't say that others are stupid. This world has never lacked smart people. Xiaohua sighed and sat down again. He held his chin and pondered. The jade slips he obtained from the 10,000 Poisons sect were limited. That Xianxia was not a particularly famous person in the 10,000 Poisons sect. He could not find any useful clues. Xiaohua suddenly realized something. He slightly opened his left hand and opened his illusion breaker Dharma eye. This time, Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. He saw that the entire karst cave was like a sea of blue. A sea of blue. That usually extremely light blue water-based spiritual chi of heaven and earth seemed to have been thickened by ink. The color was much heavier. Moreover, this color dyed the inside of the cave. What he saw with his magic eye seemed to be what he saw at the bottom of the sea. Xiaohua quietly looked inside the stone wall again. It was the same deep blue, as if the whole world was this blue. Xiao Mao, come here for a moment. Xiaohua called Xiao Mao over and said in a low voice, "You exercise a little bit." "Okay." Xiao Mao was very puzzled by Xiaohua's words. However, he still exercised his true core strength. In his magic eye, he saw that Xiao Mao was not in a human form. There were only a few azure veins that looked similar to meridians. As Xiao Mao exercised his true core strength, the azure veins moved slightly. Other than these azure veins, the other places were only light blue. However, this light blue was slowly becoming heavier. It should be that this special water-based spiritual chi of heaven and earth was gradually seeping into Xiao Mao's body. "Yes, it's done," Xiaohua said in a low voice. Xiao Mao looked at Xiaohua and wanted to ask, but when he saw Xiaohua frowning and looking pensive, he didn't speak and returned to the crowd. "Fellow Taoists, we've already discussed it. The most important thing now is to find what exactly caused our true core strength to disappear. I wonder which of the new fellow Taoists knows?" Li Zongbao asked after greeting the crowd of cultivators. Unfortunately, a disciple of the Utmost Happiness faction answered in a low voice. "Senior Brother Li, we've also discussed this matter on the way here. None of us have heard of such a strange thing. Our 3 kingdoms of cultivation admittedly also have this kind of poisonous thing, but it's definitely not as mysterious as this thing. It can cause us to be poisoned without us noticing at all. We feel that this might not be the doing of a poisonous thing. It might be some kind of sword cultivator's secret technique." Yes, Li Zongbao nodded and declined to comment. "However, as long as we don't use our magic power, we'll be fine for now. Let's wait for a while. Maybe there's a chance of survival?" The disciples' plan seemed to be similar to that of Xiaohua and the others. "Senior Brother Li." Xiaohua sent a message to Li Zongbao. "In my opinion, our previous plan might not work. Junior brother, what did you find?" Li Zongbao was slightly surprised. He knew Xiaohua was afraid that the others would panic, so he also sent a message to Li Zongbao. "This karst cave is the same as the outside world. The water-based spiritual chi of heaven and earth is polluted." Xiaohua explained, "Although we don't move, our bodies are surrounded by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. The poisonous thing keeps entering our bodies. After a long time, we don't know what will happen. Moreover, according to Qin Jian's calculation, he wouldn't have guessed that we were hiding here. He must have some other poisonous trick to force us out and even kill us here." Hiss, Li Zongbao also took a deep breath and sighed. What Junior Brother said is really reasonable. Compared to Qin Jian, we're really too far apart. Not only in terms of cultivation, but also in terms of scheming. "Haha, Senior Brother Li, how can you boost others' prestige and destroy your own spirit?" Xiaohua said with a smile. "This is just my guess. It can't be taken seriously." "Yes, what are your plans?" Li Zongbao didn't say much and asked. You wait here to discuss. I'll go out for a walk. Firstly, I'll see if I can gather more disciples. Secondly, I'll see if I can find a golden core master. Xiaohua replied. Of course, if I can meet a golden core master, that would be the best. Alas, I have a secret technique with martial uncle. However, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth is polluted. Not only can I not use the secret technique, but even if I could, I wouldn't dare to use it. Li Zongbao sighed. However, I don't agree with junior brother's idea. After all, although your magic power is profound, your true essence will disappear and can't be replenished. Hearing this, Xiaohua also extinguished the idea of asking Li Zongbao for the secret technique. He smiled and said, Senior brother, don't worry. I have some confidence. If it doesn't work, I'll come back again. All right. Li Zongbao sighed and watched Xiaohua open the restriction and take the array disc. Senior brother Xiao, what are you doing? A Cool Breeze Valley disciple asked hurriedly. Oh, I'll go out and see if I can find other senior brothers or find another way out. Xiaohua didn't hide anything and said, That's great. I also have the same idea. I wonder if I can go with senior brother? The Cool Breeze Valley disciple said happily. Xiaohua glanced at him and said coldly, If you want to go out, none of us will stop you. However, I don't plan to go with others. After saying this, he turned around and left. Cough cough. Li Zongbao saw this and looked at the thousands of cultivators in the cave. He said, We're hiding here for the sake of expediency. We need to work together. If any of you have your own ideas like Xiaohua, you can go out now. I also hope that you can find a suitable way. Of course, for our safety, you only have one chance. If any of you want to go out, you can leave now. In the future, I'll be in charge of this array disc. Only others can come in and no one can go out unless we all leave together. All right, I'll go out and try my luck. The Cool Breeze Valley disciple cupped his hands and was about to leave. Wait! A Changbai sect disciple stopped him and said coldly, You can go out, but you have to swear a blood oath that you can't reveal our location. Otherwise, I won't be at ease letting you go out. But Xiaohua from the Imperial Thunder sect just left. Why didn't you make him swear a blood oath? The Cool Breeze Valley disciple said angrily. Chapter 25-27. How can you compare to Senior Brother Xiao? Senior Brother Xiao defeated tens of thousands of sword cultivators with Senior Brother Li. Of course, he's going out for us. I'm not worried. The Changbai sect disciple replied without hesitation. That's right. Any disciple who wants to leave must first make a blood oath. The group of disciples came to their senses and said, Oh, okay. The Cool Breeze Valley disciple was quick to make a blood oath and hurriedly left. Then, another dozen disciples left. There were disciples from the Cool Breeze Valley and the Utmost Happiness faction. However, none of the Changbai sect disciples left. Not to mention the other disciples' motives for leaving, Xiaohua didn't activate his magic power when he came out of the cave. Instead, he used the ethereal steps. Although his speed wasn't as fast as the flying technique, it was still much faster than an ordinary person. He floated out of the cave like a wisp of smoke. After waiting for a few breaths, Xiaohua slightly checked his true essence. There was also some consumption, but it was much less than when he used the flying technique. It seems that the blue thing in the spiritual qi of heaven and earth isn't as simple as I thought. If it accumulates in my body for a long time, even a slight movement will devour my true essence, right? Xiaohua thought. His body slowed down again. As he walked slowly, he released his divine sense. Fortunately, there was nothing wrong with his divine sense. It could even go a little farther. At this time, the cave was dead silent. Only the sound of Xiaohua's footsteps could be heard. There was no one else in sight. Presumably, the other cultivators had the same idea as Xiaohua and the others. Here it is. Xiaohua looked left and right. His body flew up and rushed toward the stone wall. When the stone wall was near, he used the earth escape technique and entered the stone wall. Oh, this stone wall is also strange. As soon as Xiaohua entered the stone wall, he immediately felt a great resistance. It was not as easy as before when he used the earth escape technique. After a few dozen feet, he felt like he was wading through a quagmire. Even the true essence in his body was greatly consumed. He didn't dare to go any further and hurriedly retreated from the stone wall. Landing in the cave, Xiaohua's expression was extremely ugly. Looking at the stone wall above his head, he lightly bit his lips. The last hope in his heart had also dissipated. Looks like if I can't find a thin enough stone wall, this young master's Fa Li won't be enough. Humph, if this vicious scheme wasn't done by Qin Jian, I wouldn't believe it even if you beat me to death. Qin Jian's face appeared in Xiaohua's mind. He really wanted to stab Qin Jian's face a few times. Sigh, this guy mainly schemed against those few golden core cultivators, but he didn't expect to trap me as well. Xiaohua sighed. Although his magic power was profound and was comparable to late-stage golden core, he was also helpless when encountering this thing that consumed true essence. Let's find where the stone walls are thin first. Xiaohua thought as he opened his left hand and looked at the 4 walls of the karst cave. However, he only knew the name of the Dharma Eye. He didn't know the origin of the Dharma Eye at all, and there was no need to talk about any cultivation. Everything depended on the instincts of the Dharma Eye. Normally, when looking for the flaws of the Dharma Eye was right in front of him, and he could look at it. However, at this time he had to look further and deeper. All of a sudden, Xiaohua was stumped. He didn't know how to look deeper, how to find where the stone walls were the shallowest. Even if I can't find it, then I still have to find it. Xiaohua knew that this was the only way for him, Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao, and the others to survive. He could only grit his teeth and slowly explore. The stone walls were filled with azure. It was no different from the other places in the karst cave. However, as Xiaohua wandered aimlessly, he gradually discovered a difference. The azure within the karst cave was just like that. It was like a clear sky, and it felt as if it stretched as far as the eye could see. However, the stone walls seemed to be mottled, and the brightness of the azure was somewhat different. It was as if some of the clouds in the sky were blocking the azure color. The inside of the stone walls are all rock layers, and there is also water-type spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If the stone walls are thicker, there will be more spiritual energy contained, and this azure color will be bright. Xiaohua inwardly pondered. If the stone walls are thinner, there will be less spiritual energy contained, and the azure color will naturally be dim. I only need to find where the color is the dimmest, and also the place that can be broken through the most. Then, I can use the overturning sea seal to break through this layer. Wouldn't I be able to escape? This place is definitely beyond the expectations of a sword cultivator, right? As it turned out, Xiaohua wanted to use the overturning sea seal to break through the layer and create a passage. However, Xiaohua didn't know how thick this rock layer was, and how much spiritual energy he would need to use to break through it. Therefore, he could only try his best to find where the azure color was the dimmest. Every time he found a place that looked similar, Xiaohua would use his Buddhist awareness to make a mark, and then continue to walk down. It was the same as when he left the karst cave. He also used his Buddhist awareness to make a mark. He didn't have the confidence that he could successfully find Li Zongbao and the others again. After searching for several hours, Xiaohua felt that he had walked more than 10 li. He had also made over 100 marks. Unfortunately, these marks were all similar, and there wasn't a particularly obvious dimness. Sahib, Xiaohua sighed slightly. Just as he was about to turn back, he heard movement in front of him. "Cunning cultivator, where are you going?" And the voice was getting closer and closer. Oh! Xiaohua heard that a cultivator was being chased by a sword cultivator. How could he ignore it? He hurriedly walked a few steps, and just as he was about to go over to take a look, he saw a few sword lights in the distance flying towards him. Ah! Since when did Changbai sect cultivators understand sword cultivator flying swords? Seeing a Changbai sect disciple in Taoist robes desperately escaping on a flying sword with 3 sword cultivators chasing behind him, Xiaohua couldn't help but be stunned. But just a moment later, Xiaohua said self-deprecatingly, "Since this young master can practice the flying sword techniques of sword cultivators, the Changbai sect has disciples who practice flying swords. There is no reason not to practice the flying sword techniques of sword cultivators. Senior brother Xiao, save me!" That Changbai sect disciple wasn't fated to die. When he saw Xiaohua from afar, he was overjoyed and hurriedly shouted. Even if Xiaohua didn't want to save him, he couldn't escape now. Fortunately, Xiao Hua's awe-inspiring aura from before was still present. When the three swordsmen saw that it was actually this fiend, their expressions changed and they immediately turned to flee, afraid that Xiao Hua would catch up to them. Heh. Xiao Hua's little tail also stood up when he saw how mighty he was. Little did he know that the sword cultivators who had escaped were all curling their lips as they whispered in unison, "Just let this guy be free for a while. After this round of killing, he will know the methods of us sword cultivators." The Changbai sect disciple landed and bowed respectfully with lingering fear. Junior brother Niu Ming from Changbai sect greets senior brother Xiao. "Thank you, senior brother, for saving my life." "Don't mention it." Xiao Hua waved his hand. "I didn't even lift my hand. What life-saving grace is there?" "Hee, it's all because of senior brother's awe-inspiring reputation. You were much more powerful than anyone else when you raised your hand." Niu Ming flattered. Then he looked behind Xiao Hua and asked curiously, "Senior brother Li Zongbao and junior brother Xiao Mao? They hid like the other disciples. Why didn't you hide?" Xiao Hua didn't directly tell him where Li Zongbao and the others were hiding and asked him a question instead. "Sigh, junior brother feels that just hiding isn't the best strategy. We should find a place to break through before the sword cultivators make their next move. Otherwise, we can only be slaughtered by the sword cultivators." Niu Ming didn't hide anything and said. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. "Did you find anything?" "Sigh, if it was so easy to find, then the sword cultivators' preparations over the past few years would have been in vain." Niu Ming sighed. Junior brother only searched for 2 hours and saw that the number of sword cultivators in the cave gradually increased. "They must have come out to kill us." Junior brother tried to hide, but I was still discovered by several sword cultivators. If it wasn't for senior brother Xiao, junior brother probably wouldn't have been able to escape. Xiao Hua didn't comment. He looked at Niu Ming and narrowed his eyes. Niu Ming didn't understand. He looked at himself in surprise and then looked around. When he saw the flying sword in his hand, his expression changed slightly. Hee, Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Junior brother Niu, since you already found something wrong, do you still need me to say it?" "Senior brother Xiao," Niu Ming hurriedly smiled apologetically, "I am indeed a disciple of the Changbai sect. I'm definitely not a sword cultivator. This flying sword. Sigh, since I've reached this level, I don't dare to hide it. However, when I was practicing the secret technique, I already swore a blood oath that I couldn't reveal a single word. I hope senior brother Xiao can understand. The disciples of the Changbai sect are good at flying swords. It's normal for them to practice the flying sword technique of sword cultivators." Xiao Hua said with a smile. "But the restriction of the Sky Patrol City is specially designed to check the sword origin. How did you escape?" "Of course. There's a secret technique." Niu Ming smiled bitterly. "Obviously, this involved a blood oath. But I'm really curious. I also want to prove that you're not a sword cultivator." Xiao Hua continued to ask. "Although there are jade slips in my storage bag, if senior brother Xiao forces me, I'd rather die together with you." Niu Ming said sternly. Whoosh! It was Xiao Hua's Taoist robe swaying. Xiao Hua stretched out his hand without hesitation and grabbed Niu Ming's throat like a flash of lightning. Ah! Niu Ming was shocked. Although he was prepared, he didn't expect Xiao Hua to be so fast. The strangest thing was that there didn't seem to be any spiritual power fluctuations. However, he was only shocked when Xiao Hua pressed his thumb on his neck. His vision turned black and he fainted. "Ha!" Xiao Hua looked at Niu Ming, who had fallen to the ground, then reached out and took his storage pouch. He opened it and looked carefully. There weren't many jade slips inside, so he didn't look at them carefully. He copied them one by one and put them back into his storage pouch. Then, he put the storage bag in Niu Ming's arms. He took the jade slips and checked them one by one. Chapter 25-28. Oh, so that's how it is. Xiao Hua was proficient in the art of flying swords. He only needed to read it once to understand. Some of the Changbai sect's disciples have been nurturing swords since they were young, but these disciples were specially selected. Their primordial spirits are strong enough to withstand the division. It seems that Reverend Bright Sword left some of his secret techniques in the Changbai sect. These disciples have both vital essence and sword essence in their bodies. They usually use vital essence to drive ordinary flying swords and use secret techniques to conceal sword essence. But now, they don't use vital essence and only use sword essence. Of course, they won't be affected by the strange spiritual energy of heaven and earth. However, the Changbai sect doesn't allow this secret technique to be publicized, so these disciples don't dare to use it easily. Moreover, with sword cultivation alone, these disciples who are in the foundation stage can only fall into the realm of nurturing swords. They are no match for sword cultivators, so. Xiaohua pinched his chin and pondered. Senior brother Xiao, what happened to me? Why did I suddenly faint? Niuming slowly woke up and asked in surprise. You were being chased by sword cultivators just now. Maybe your qi and blood surged. Xiaohua collected his thoughts and said with a smile. So that's how it is. Niuming nodded. Thank you senior brother Xiao for looking after me. Well, do you want to go by yourself now? Or do you want to go by yourself? Xiaohua asked. What? Xiaohua's question stunned Niuming. Then he came to his senses and said with a bitter smile. Since I've already come out, there's no reason to turn back. I'd better find a way out myself. Xiaohua nodded and pointed in a direction. Senior brother Li Zongbao and the others are there. You can go there and find them. If there's a chance, you can go by yourself. If not, we'll be together and take care of each other. Oh right, there are hundreds of your sect's disciples there. Hearing this, Niuming's eyes lit up. He bowed again and said, Thank you senior brother Xiao for your advice. I understand. I'll go now. Senior brother, you have to be careful too. Well go. Xiaohua waved his hand and watched Niuming leave on his flying sword. Damn it, the Changbai sect is indeed powerful. Why didn't I think of this? They actually concealed sword essence. Xiaohua turned around and walked in Niuming's direction. As he walked, he took out a jade slip and carefully examined it. His dream executioner and mountain splitter had been successfully nurtured into swords, and he had been using dream executioner for a long time. However, he had never deliberately cultivated the flying sword arts of sword cultivators. He had always used his original spiritual sense to control the flying sword, which was no different from using a magic treasure. However, such a flying sword could only be a magic treasure and not a true flying sword, even if it had a sword spirit. Although he had recently begun to comprehend the sword arts of ordinary sword cultivators, he was still hesitant. Sword cultivation was different from the Buddhist sect. Sword essence could be easily seen by cultivators. Moreover, in the midst of a great sword Dao battle, he was already afraid that he would be discovered by others. How could he dare to cultivate sword essence? When he thought of sword origin, Xiaohua understood why his 7-star Great Formation was not as powerful as Ling Yunwu's 7-star Great Formation. Not only did he control it through his sword pouch, not only did his 7-star Great Formation consist of 7 flying swords transformed from illusory swords, but most importantly, it should be sword origin, right? And the reason why his flying sword could not produce sword intent was probably because of sword origin, right? But Reverend Brightsword's jade slip did not mention that one must cultivate sword origin. Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. But how could Reverend Brightsword's flying sword have sword intent? Unfortunately, Reverend Brightsword had already fallen. Xiaohua was dead and could not testify. Forget it, let's wait and see. If it can really conceal sword origin, this young master will also give it a try. Xiaohua secretly made up his mind. Moreover, this Niuming's jade slip also has the sword arts of nurturing sword and drawing sword. If he can cultivate it, then this young master can naturally cultivate it too. Where is this? Xiaohua originally went back the way he came, but when his mind relaxed slightly, he immediately showed his instincts. He actually walked to a dead end, a place similar to the karst cave Xiaohua first found. Xiaohua only looked and was about to turn around, but at this moment he casually raised his hand again. "Io, the brilliance here is very dim." After Xiaohua saw it with his Dharma eye, he could not help but be overjoyed. "It's here." Xiaohua did not hesitate to use his Buddhist sense to make an imprint, hurriedly walked out, and then walked back. The way back was naturally not as easy as before. Xiaohua easily found several dead ends, and these dead ends without exception. The walls of the karst cave looked extremely thin. Damn it, did I make a mistake? Xiaohua did not know whether to laugh or cry. If that's the case, then the first karst cave this young master found was the thinnest place, right? Didn't this young master's efforts go in vain? Oh, that's not right. At that time, I already saw it in the karst cave. It was not like that. Xiaohua immediately shook his head again. But fortunately, Xiaohua had other Buddhist sense marks along the way. Although he spent a lot of effort, he finally found the way back. Not far from the karst cave where Li Zongbao and the others were hiding, Xiaohua found another karst cave. This karst cave was smaller than the previous one, but it looked darker than the others. Moreover, Xiaohua also gradually fumbled around. The smaller the karst cave on the dead end, the thinner the walls. Like the one he found before, the walls were naturally thick. After Xiaohua removed his Buddhist sense imprint and hammered the walls a few times, Li Zongbao noticed the movement and opened the restriction, letting Xiaohua in. Seeing Xiaohua come back safely, Li Zongbao was overjoyed. Without waiting for him to speak, Xiaohua's eyes swept the karst cave, and he could not help but be stunned. Before he left, there were only a few hundred people in this karst cave, not 1,000. But now, the inside of the karst cave was dark. At a glance, there were thousands of people, perhaps tens of thousands. Why are there so many people? Xiaohua felt inconceivable. After all, it was only a dozen or so hours. Most importantly, he only met that cultivator, Niu Ming, along the way. However, Xiaohua immediately understood. It was not that there was no one in this karst cave, but everyone was looking for a way out. Only he could not find a way out. He was looking for a dead end, and on this dead end, he could only meet Niu Ming, who was also forced into a dead end. Damn it, is this young master so unlucky? Xiaohua rubbed his nose, almost touching the phoenix talisman on his chest. It's like this. How could Li Zongbao know that Xiaohua suddenly raised this matter to countless heights? He explained, after junior brother Xiao left, we discussed for a long time, but we did not have any ideas. We did not even have the slightest clue about this strange poison. We thought that we could not just sit and wait for death, and put all our hopes on junior brother. Therefore, we chose a few disciples with profound magic power from each sect and asked them to go out and find the disciples of other sects. So it's like this. Xiaohua let out a sigh of relief and smiled. That's the best. Junior brother also felt that the weight on his shoulders was very heavy, and I was afraid that I could not bear it. I just don't know how the discussion went. Sigh, what the hell? Li Zongbao also cursed. There are nearly 10,000 cultivators in my Dao sect, but none of them have seen this poison before. They say that it is a strange poison that can devour one's vital energy. Also, a few disciples have some antidote pills on them, but they are all useless. Even a disciple lost his life because of it. Fight poison with poison. This idea immediately appeared in Xiaohua's mind. He was very glad that he did not use it forcefully before. While they were talking, there were some fluctuations of magic power at the entrance of the cave. Li Zongbao did not even think and wanted to activate the formation plate. Junior brother should do it. Xiaohua stretched out his hand. In such a dangerous place, one more bit of true essence is one more bit of guarantee. With a flash of his hand, Xiaohua took the formation plate that Li Zongbao did not want to return to him. He pointed his hand and a green light slowly flew towards the entrance of the cave. After the array flashed, it revealed close to 100 Changbai sect disciples at the entrance of the cave. Senior brother Li, senior brother Xiao. These disciples clearly recognized Xiaohua and Li Zongbao. They cupped their hands and quickly walked in. All right, senior brothers, please come in. Behind Li Zongbao, Xiao Mao had already arrived. However, when he saw Li Zongbao talking to Xiaohua, he did not greet them. Instead, he stepped forward and nodded slightly at Xiaohua, and was about to lead the Changbai sect disciples in. Senior brother Li. A Changbai sect disciple at the front said softly, I have an older senior brother who seems to have some understanding of this strange poison. I did not dare to delay and quickly brought them over. Oh, is that so? That's great. Li Zongbao was overjoyed. He turned around and said to Xiao Mao, invite senior brother Yi Bei from Changbai sect and senior brother Jian Boming from Qingfeng Valley over. We will discuss this together. Yes. Xiao Mao hastily turned around. Before long, two white-haired late-stage foundation-building old men quickly walked over. Both of them greeted Xiao Hua. Then, the 100 or so Changbai sect disciples left with Xiao Mao. A short and wrinkled middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator stayed behind. However, Yi Bei from Changbai sect saw that this elder was unfamiliar. He cupped his hands and said, "Forgive me for not recognizing you, but I don't think I've seen you in the sect before?" "Haha, senior brother Yi. I'm only a mid-stage foundation establishment cultivator. I'm just a good-for-nothing disciple of the Changbai sect. How could the sect catch your eye?" The old man smacked his dry lips and smiled apologetically. That's true." Yi Bei nodded. Changbai sect has many foundation establishment disciples. There are also many disciples from the 18 Sword Peaks. There are too many that I haven't seen before. How should I address you, junior brother? "I'm Bai Fei." The elder was slightly surprised as he replied. "All right, junior brother Bai. What do you know? If you can help with the detoxification this time, our lives will be saved by you. This is a great contribution. I will definitely ask for a reward for you." Chapter 25-29. This. Bai Fei bit his lips and his eyes flickered. What's wrong? Yi Bei was slightly stunned and asked curiously, "Could it be that you have some concerns?" Hearing this, Li Zongbao and the others unconsciously took a few steps back. If Bai Fei said yes, they would retreat immediately. However, Bai Fei smiled and said in a low voice, "Of course not. Although this thing is very old, it is far from being a secret. Moreover, this matter is very important. I naturally won't have any concerns." Yi Bei's expression softened and he nodded. "This matter concerns the lives of tens of thousands of disciples from the 3 sections. Even if it is a secret of the Changbai sect, we can't not reveal it. Just say it. If there is anything wrong, senior brother Li and senior brother Jian will bear witness. I will bear all responsibility." He. Actually, it is not as secret as senior brother said. Bai Fei smiled and finally spoke. "I don't want any special rewards. I just want to ask senior brother Yi for a cultivation method." "You don't want this amazing merit?" When Yi Bei heard this, he instantly felt that something was amiss. However, he still said, "If your information is effective and can save the lives of these 10,000 people, not to mention the rewards from the sect, even the gratitude of these 10,000 people would be more useful than any cultivation technique. With this, won't the sect reward you with a cultivation method?" Senior brother Ye's words are naturally reasonable. Bai Fei smiled apologetically. However, these merit are all needed by senior brother Li, senior brother Xiao, senior brother Yi and senior brother Jian. Why would you want merit from a nobody like me? It's not as practical as some of the sect's secret techniques. Yi Bei looked at Li Zongbao and bit his lips hard. "If I can't take out this cultivation method, you will not save them? Will you let these disciples be killed by sword cultivators? Don't forget, Bai Fei, you've also been poisoned by this strange poison. If you say it out loud, who among us has a way out? Do you still have a way out?" Jian Boming could not bear to watch any longer and said in a low voice. Unexpectedly, Bai Fei swept his gaze over Jian Boming and sneered. "Senior apprentice brother Jian is probably a direct disciple of Cool Breeze Valley, right? You don't know the suffering of us low-level disciples. There are some secret techniques that we have long coveted, but no matter what kind of contributions we make, they will not be rewarded. Even if I reveal this information today, even if tens of thousands of disciples are saved, most of the battle merits will belong to others. How much will I lose? Even if I have these merits, I may not be able to give you the secret technique I want. Why can't I just ask for it?" "Are you sure that I know the secret technique you want?" Yi Bei asked thoughtfully. "Aren't you afraid that I will search your soul?" Jian Boming asked coldly. Of course I'm scared." Bai Fei wasn't afraid at all. However, do you think the other disciples of the Changbai sect will just stand by and watch you perform a soul search for no reason? Do you think you'll be able to soul search the things you know? Do you think that I don't have any other fellow apprentices that I'm close to? Even so, I still want to try." Jian Boming narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice. "Bai Fei, what secret technique do you want?" Yi Bei glanced at Jian Boming and asked in a low voice. Bai Fei ignored Jian Boming and said to Yi Bei, I want that sword. At this point, Bai Fei glanced at Xiaohua and the others and said a few words through voice transmission. Obviously, Yi Bei's expression didn't change when he heard this. Only the corners of his eyes twitched slightly. It was obvious that this request wasn't out of his expectations, but this request really put him in a difficult position. Of course, if senior apprentice brother Yi doesn't agree, then I'll pretend that I never said this. Bai Fei said confidently. Ha ha ha, why wouldn't I agree? Yi Bei only thought for a moment before he clapped his hands and took out 2 jade slips. He copied one of them and handed it to Bai Fei. He said, if it's for the lives of the tens of thousands of disciples of the 3 sects and the thousands of disciples of the Changbai sect, my blood oath is nothing. Good. Xiao Hua's blood boiled as he watched this. He clapped his hands and said, Senior apprentice brother Yi, just based on what you said, the heavens will definitely not let that bullshit blood oath take effect. Thank you for your auspicious words, Senior apprentice brother Xiao. Yi Bei sighed in his heart. He really didn't expect that at this critical moment, there would be a disciple of his sect like Bai Fei who would ask for a price using a jade slip. He despised and hated Bai Fei in his heart, but he had no choice but to listen to him. After all, this was the lives of tens of thousands of disciples. Wait. Jian Boming said anxiously, Bai Fei, what if the information you take out isn't related to this exotic poison? Hee, I'm in this karst cave. If the information is wrong, you can take the jade slip away at any time. Bai Fei's face was distorted with joy. He stared at the glowing jade slip in Yi Bei's hand. Give it to me. Yi Bei's expression didn't change as he stretched out his other hand. Yes. Bai Fei wasn't afraid that Yi Bei would change his mind. He opened his hand and a broken jade slip was handed over. However, when he let go of it, his other hand took the jade slip from Yi Bei's hand first. After Bai Fei read it with his divine sense, he bowed deeply and said, Thank you, senior apprentice brother Yi. Humph. Yi Bei snorted and ignored him. He immersed his divine sense into the jade slip and read it. However, when he first looked at it, his face was still filled with joy, but gradually, it changed. A bitter smile appeared on his face. Everyone was surprised, but they waited quietly. After a while, Yi Bei handed the jade slip to Li Zongbao with a bitter smile and said, Senior apprentice brother Li, take a look. What's wrong? Is the information Bai Fei gave wrong? Isn't it this exotic poison? Jian Boming said fiercely, If that's the case, even if he's a disciple of your Changbai sect, I won't forgive him. Sigh. Yi Bei shook his head and smiled bitterly. What Bai Fei gave is indeed correct. We were poisoned by the spirit-binding juice mentioned in his jade slip. However, even if we know this item and the method to detoxify this item, I'm afraid it's useless. Is that so? Even Xiao Hua was stunned when he heard this. Sure enough, after Li Zongbao finished reading, his face darkened. It was obvious that what Yi Bei said was true. Li Zongbao raised his hand to hand the jade slip to Jian Boming, but Jian Boming hurriedly stepped back and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua did not stand on ceremony. He took the jade slip and immersed his divine sense into it for a moment. He really did not know whether to laugh or cry. He handed the jade slip back to Jian Boming and looked at Bai Fei, who had already sneaked into the Changbai sect disciples in the distance. He shook his head vigorously. It turned out that according to the records in the jade slip, this so-called spirit-binding juice was once used in the sword battle 10,000 years ago. That battle was participated by the nascent soul masters. It was a sword array set up in a water-based place near the sword tomb. At that time, 1 nascent soul cultivator, 10 golden core cultivators and thousands of foundation establishment cultivators were ambushed. They barely escaped after losing 8 golden core cultivators and 2,000 foundation establishment cultivators. This incident caused a huge sensation at that time. Everyone in the Sky Patrol City was in a state of panic. Everyone was very afraid that they would encounter such a terrifying sword array one day. However, after the nascent soul cultivator recovered his spiritual power and discussed with many other nascent soul cultivators, he discovered that although this spirit-binding juice was powerful, it also had a huge drawback. This spirit-binding juice could only be used in water-based places with rich spiritual power. Moreover, it was only effective for 3 days. After these 3 days, the spirit-binding juice would lose its effect and the cultivator's spiritual power would gradually recover. The most ridiculous thing was that this spirit-binding juice did not require any antidote. As long as the cultivator who was affected by the spirit-binding juice left the range of water-based spiritual power and was blown by a strong wind in mid-air, the spirit-binding juice in his body would immediately disappear. Of course, after the spirit-binding juice disappeared, there were still side effects. However, the jade slip only mentioned it occasionally and did not go into detail. That day, the nascent soul cultivator persevered for 3 days before he defeated the sword array and broke out with the remaining disciples. Even those disciples with cultivation in the early stage of foundation establishment did not take any antidote, and their spiritual power was also restored. It was also this spirit-binding juice that relied on the element of surprise to kill 8 gold core cultivators and 2,000 foundation establishment cultivators. Later on, the sword cultivator used it several times, but it did not have any effect, so he did not use it again. Therefore, there were only a few records in the ancient books of many sections. By now, it had probably been forgotten by others. This Bai Fei had probably obtained the jade amulet from somewhere by chance. Only then did he know the reason for the spirit-binding juice. No wonder that Bai Fei did not want any battle merits or rewards. It's fine if others don't know about this thing, but if they do, the things on the jade slip are really not worth half a spirit stone. How can the conference hall give him battle merits? Xiaohua sighed and said, he might as well take this opportunity to ask for some secret method of the sect. Sigh. Jian Boming also sighed when he saw this. Now that we know the origin of the spirit-binding juice, but it's useless. It's useful. Xiao Mao smiled and said, we only need to persevere for 2 more days and this spirit-binding juice will be removed. It's a pity that Qin Jian won't give us 2 more days. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. With Qin Jian's cunning, how could he let them recover their spiritual power? Xiao Hua even felt that gathering tens of thousands of people here might be Qin Jian's arrangement to catch them all in one fell swoop. That's right. Li Zongbao nodded. I think we'll be able to. Woo-woo. A faint sound like a cow mooing came from afar, followed by the sound of water dripping into everyone's ears. This is. Xiao Hua's expression changed slightly. He suddenly thought of the river he saw in Flowing Ice Valley and immediately understood. He said anxiously, not good. Qin Jian poured the river water of Flowing Ice Valley into the karst cave. Of course, the entrance of Flowing Ice Valley's spirit stone vein was in the river. It was easy to pour the river water in. Besides, Qin Jian had already made arrangements. There were probably more than 10 entrances to the river. Chapter 25-30. Under normal circumstances, these foundation-building cultivators and even aura-refining cultivators wouldn't pay attention to the surging river water. But what about now? The river water would definitely stimulate the effect of the spirit-binding juice, and cultivators would also have to use their magic power to avoid the river water. No matter how one looked at it, pouring the river water was the most poisonous trick. That's right, it was the river water. Soon, the sound of the surging river water and waves hitting the karst cave quickly spread over. Of course, many cultivators began to panic. Follow me. At this moment, Xiao Hua made up his mind and waved his hand. I have a way. Junior martial brother Xiao? Li Zongbao was stunned at first. Then he was overjoyed because Xiao Hua had never disappointed him. Li Zongbao hastily flew into the air and shouted, disciples of all sects, get into formation and follow us out. Junior martial brother Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect has already found a way out. Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Xiao. Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Li. Everyone cheered loudly, and a few aura-refining disciples were almost crying tears of joy. Seeing Li Zongbao's momentum, Xiao Hua said anxiously, Senior Martial Brother Li, I only have a way. I don't dare to say it'll be completely useful. As long as it's a way, it might be useful. Li Zongbao answered indifferently. If it's not like this, they'll be in chaos first. How will we defend against the enemy? How will we contend against the river water? Xiao Hua nodded, feeling his shoulders immediately become heavy again. Not daring to be negligent, Xiao Hua hastily flew out of the karst cave, closed his eyes, released his Buddhist sense, and flew towards the place marked previously. Xiao Hua muttered as he flew, secretly praying that he wouldn't lose it this time. Perhaps Xiao Hua's prayer was effective. Or perhaps Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense was effective. In short, after a while, Xiao Hua successfully found the karst cave marked last. It's here. Xiao Hua heaved a long sigh of relief, feeling as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. There's a way out here? Li Zongbao scanned with his divine sense and saw another karst cave without a way out. Beside him, Xiao Mao was also surprised. There's no way out now, but this little brother will soon find a way out. Xiao Hua flew into the cave and clapped his hands. The seal of overturning sea landed in his hands. With a tap of his hand, the seal of overturning sea rapidly expanded. Seal of overturning the sea? Li Zongbao exclaimed in shock. Where did you get it from? Ah? You actually recognize him? Xiao Hua was speechless. According to Ji Yi, this thing had disappeared for thousands of years. How could Li Zongbao from the Utmost Happiness faction recognize it? Li Zongbao frowned as if he thought of something and said, I know a thing or two about the famous magic treasures of the various sections. The seal of the Changbai sect is also famous in Meng. How can I not know? Although he had mysteriously disappeared for 1,000 years, to think that he had fallen into the hands of a sword cultivator, I have no other choice. Xiao Hua pointed at the rock wall and said, I can only rely on the magic power in my body to activate the seal of overturning the sea to break through this place. Other than that, there is indeed no other way. Good brother. Li Zongbao nodded. Go ahead and do it. This thing is given to you by me. Ugh. Xiao Hua shook his head. I'm afraid this reason is not very useful. Li Zongbao came to his senses and looked outside the karst cave. He said, I will go out now and ask many disciples to set up a defense in front of the karst cave. First, they will block the river water. Second, they will block the sword cultivators. I will not let them in. Thank you, senior brother Li. As he spoke, Xiao Hua activated his magic power. The seal of overturning the sea emitted a yellow brilliance. Spiritual qi of heaven and earth gathered like a swarm of bees. Lines of jade appeared on the seal of overturning the sea. Go! Xiao Hua shouted. He grasped the seal of overturning the sea with his bare hands and used his strength to smash it at the place he had chosen earlier. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rang out and the entire karst cave shook. A hole of several feet in size and several feet deep was smashed out by the seal of overturning the sea. Countless stones fell down from the sky with a crackling sound. When Li Zongbao saw that Xiao Hua had taken action, he didn't have time to ask why he had chosen this place. He hurriedly flew out of the karst cave. Li Zongbao raised the divine piercing whip in his hand and shouted, Disciples, listen to my command. Whoever dares to use his divine sense to spy on the karst cave, whoever dares to take half a step into the karst cave will be killed by me. Disciples of the Utopia faction, set up a defense in the center. Disciples of the Tai Bai faction, set up a defense in the left. Disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley, set up a defense in the right. The terrain here is very high. We will release our magic weapons to block the river water. Don't let the river water rush into the karst cave. As long as we hold on for a few breaths, the river water will naturally flow to another place. Yes, we understand. Although the disciples didn't know what Li Zongbao, Xiao Hua, and Xiao Mao were doing in the karst cave, they saw that only Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao came out. Xiao Hua must be doing something inside. At this time, the loud rumbling sound had already reached everyone's ears. Those who were smart already knew what Xiao Hua was thinking. Although Xiao Hua's action was really the stupidest method, at this time, what other methods did they have? Although Xiao Hua's method was the stupidest, it was the most effective. As long as the path was opened, they could rush out of the underground. Then, the sword cultivators and the spirit binding juice would be turned into smoke. Therefore, these disciples were very obedient to Li Zongbao's arrangement. They took out their magic weapons and lined up in a formation. With their backs to the karst cave, they quietly waited for the river water to come. Of course, they didn't dare to use their divine sense to spy on the karst cave. They were afraid that Li Zongbao's divine piercing whip would fall on their bodies. However, in the formation of the Changbai sect, the disciple Bai Fei, who had just exchanged the spirit-binding juice jade pendant for one of Yi Bei's secret arts of the Changbai sect, was shocked again. He took out his flying sword and waited for the river water to come. At the same time, he listened carefully. The sound of Xiaohua hitting the rock wall with the seal of the tumbling sea came again and again. First it was like an earthquake. Then, the sound became softer and softer, but the vibration was still there. After listening for a while, Bai Fei's face suddenly showed astonishment. Then, joy appeared in his eyes. Then, Bai Fei turned and flew towards the karst cave. Bai Fei, what are you doing? Yi Bei was behind the Changbai sect disciples. Seeing Bai Fei's strange behavior, he shouted angrily. All right, senior brother Yi, this little brother has something to tell senior brother Xiaohua Xiao. Bai Fei shouted. It's important, it's absolutely important. Stop. Yi Bei sneered. What other shady business do you want to do? Don't take advantage of our kindness. I wouldn't dare, Bai Fei smiled bitterly. This matter is really important. It's definitely different from before. If there's any falsehood this time, I'll let senior brother Xiao punish me. Yi Bei was a bit embarrassed and looked at Li Zongbao. Come here. Li Zongbao originally wanted to refuse, but when he thought about how this guy actually had a jade talisman that recorded a poison like the spirit-binding juice from 10,000 years ago, he knew that he definitely had something else. Bai Fei arrived in front of Li Zongbao and stole a glance at the karst cave. He transmitted his voice. I'll be frank. Did senior brother Xiaohua use my Changbai sect's cloud-suppressing seal or ocean-overturning seal to break through the walls? How do you know? Li Zongbao's expression didn't change. I judged it from the sound. Bai Fei didn't hide it. I have the secret technique to use these two items. I'm willing to give it to you. Oh. Li Zongbao was moved. He knew that even if Xiaohua had the ocean-overturning seal, he might not have the complete method to refine and use it. I don't know whether it's these two treasures or not, Li Zongbao said coldly. He couldn't be bothered to deal with this rare oddity in a Dao cultivator battle. Then, I'll have to ask senior brother Li. This concerns my life. I can't just sit back and do nothing, Bai Fei said with deep emotion. So, you're willing to give it out for free? Li Zongbao looked at Bai Fei strangely. He really didn't believe it. Hee, of course I can't give it out for free. Bai Fei smiled apologetically. However, my condition is very simple. I'm sure senior brother Li can fulfill it. Tell me. Li Zongbao didn't ask for the jade slip at all. He just asked for the conditions first. It's nothing. Just two conditions. Bai Fei's eyes were filled with hope. Say it. Li Zongbao replied indifferently. The first condition is very simple. If this passage is broken through, I hope to pass through after senior brother Li and the two senior brothers Xiao. Or if the three senior brothers don't take the lead, then I'll be the fourth. Bai Fei bit his lips and smiled apologetically. The second condition. The second condition is also very simple. I need a cultivation method and a flying sword. The cultivation method is for sword cultivators. It can be cultivated all the way to the 3rd grade of illusory sword. The flying sword is for illusory sword swordsmen. What? Li Zongbao was stunned. You're a Changbai sect disciple and a Taoist sect cultivator. What do you need the flying sword and cultivation method for? Senior brother Li, you don't have to worry about this. Bai Fei smiled embarrassedly. Senior brother Li and the two senior brothers Xiao are so brave, they must have this item in their storage pouches. As long as senior brother Li agrees, this little brother will immediately give senior brother Xiao the secret technique of refining and using the seal. I don't have what you want. Li Zongbao waved his sleeves and shook his head. What about the other senior brother Xiao? As he spoke, Bai Fei looked at Xiao Mao. However, he had been transmitting his voice to Li Zongbao. Xiao Mao didn't know at all. When he saw the white-haired old man looking at him, he was rather surprised. What he didn't know was that he had been promoted to senior brother in this old man's words. Forget it, Li Zongbao said indifferently. You wait. I'll ask junior brother Xiao first. Thank you, senior brother Li. Bai Fei's lips curled into a smile. He was very sure that his ears didn't mishear. Xiaohua would definitely exchange with him. Sure enough, when Xiaohua heard Li Zongbao's words, he couldn't help but be shocked. What? Bai Fei can actually hear with his own ears that I'm using the seal of overturning the sea? How can this be? It seems like it's true. Li Zongbao nodded. This guy is also a genius. If he used his mind on the righteous path, he should have achieved great success. However, his methods are somewhat despicable. In my opinion, his future achievements will be limited. Chapter 25:31. Xiaohua said with a smile, "That's your opinion. Bai Fei might not think so. Moreover, he deliberately searched for every opportunity to cultivate. Every step was calculated by him. His achievements might not be inferior to yours and mine. So much so that he'll far surpass us in the future." Heaven rewards the diligent, but heaven doesn't reward despicable people. Even if his cultivation far surpasses mine and his methods are contemptible, I still don't think highly of him. He doesn't need you to think highly of him. Xiaohua angrily responded to Li Zongbao. Alas, that's true. Li Zongbao actually understood in his heart. He sighed. Everyone has their own way of cultivating. Everyone has their own way of living. Why should I impose my own way of thinking on others? Moreover, Bai Fei's plan is really common on Dawn Rain Continent, and it's also really effective. Now, which cultivator doesn't look at immediate benefits and place the great Tao at the bottom of cultivation advancement? That's right. Seeing Li Zongbao sigh with emotion, Xiaohua smiled. Go get his jade slip. If it's useful, I'll agree to his conditions. I'll go right away. Li Zongbao said and was about to turn back, but at this time, Xiaohua stopped Li Zongbao again, and said, Also, senior brother Li, the river is about to arrive, but the swordsmen haven't attacked yet. Blocking the river doesn't require so many people, right? Let the remaining disciples come over. Each of them will consume 10% of their magic power to help me open up the passage. There are thousands of disciples here. Even if each of them opens up 3 feet, those 3 will still be 10 feet. If everyone works hard, it'll be close to 2,000 feet, almost a dozen miles. It's much more effective than me doing it myself. Li Zongbao looked at the passage that Xiaohua opened up, and shook his head slightly. Human strength is sometimes limited. You can think of borrowing the power of other cultivators at this juncture. It's really praiseworthy. However, even if you say so, it might not work. Just now, I also thought about this. Among the thousands of disciples, at most 60% will have suitable treasures. Among these 60% will be at the mid or late foundation establishment stage. In fact, less than 40% will be able to come out. Also, the higher you go, the more difficult it will be. Even the inner layer of restrictions is not something we can break. That formation also consumes a lot of magic power, so don't be too optimistic. And that's indeed the case. Xiaohua also nodded. Just now, when I was circulating my energy, I was already thinking about it. However, I might not be able to clear it by myself. Only with the help of these disciples will we be able to succeed. Li Zongbao nodded and instructed. All right, expand the passageway a little more. When the passageway gets deeper, one disciple will enter, and the other will follow. Don't waste time. Got it. Also, tell them to put the broken stones into their storage bags. Don't worry, everyone knows about such details. Li Zongbao said disapprovingly. Yes. Little brother will expand the passageway right now. Xiaohua agreed. Swinging his arms, he started to work hard. Not long after, Li Zongbao came back with an old jade pendant, which was similar to the one that Bai Fei had given to Yi Bei. Xiaohua looked at it with his divine thought, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. He snorted coldly and said, Bai Fei was right. This is indeed the secret art of refining and using the cloud-suppressing seal, the sea-overturning seal, and the mountain-crushing seal. It's absolutely correct. This Bai Fei. What's his background? How could he have so many secret arts of the Changbai sect? Who cares who he is? Li Zongbao sneered. He's just a disciple in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. He's not from the Utopia faction. He can do whatever he wants. All right, Xiaohua said, and took out a sword slip and a flying sword from the space and gave them to Li Zongbao. He said, "Give this to Bai Fei. Little brother will go to the side to refine the sea overturning seal. I still need to comprehend the secret art of using it. You let the other disciples come in and open the passageway." Li Zongbao didn't say anything. He took the sword slip and the flying sword and walked out. Not long after, the disciples of the Utopia faction came in first. One by one, they rushed into the passageway that Xiaohua had already opened, which was more than 10 feet long. At this time, the rumbling sound of waves could be heard from outside. The torrential river water had already rushed into the karst cave with a huge amount of ice. According to Li Zongbao's previous arrangement, the disciples of the three factions each stood in a place and took out their magic weapons. The magic weapons emitted a bright brilliance, like a barrier blocking the river water. Everyone looked at the different magic weapons in the river water. The magic power in their bodies was like the river water, and disappeared very quickly. They were terrified. If it weren't for the calm disciples like Li Zongbao, and the support of the disciples like Xiaohua who could find a way to escape, they really didn't dare to imagine what would happen to them if they were alone in the river water. Disciples, if more than half of your magic power is consumed, immediately withdraw and let the disciples behind you support you. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao stood behind the crowd. Li Zongbao arranged for the disciples to enter the karst cave to open the passageway. Xiao Mao saw the light curtain in front of him faintly flickering and immediately shouted, "Yes, we understand." The crowd of disciples shouted. Their voices rushed into the karst cave and echoed back and forth. The momentum was like a rainbow, suppressing the torrential river water. The river water seemed to be endless. In one breath, it poured in for less than half an hour. Although the cultivators guarding in front of them had changed dozens of times, the river water still continued to surge. The waves in front of the light curtain were several feet long. Looking inside the karst cave, the disciples of the Utopia faction had all entered. Li Zongbao roughly estimated that there were less than 2,000 people. Moreover, he had already asked the disciples who fell in the passageway. Their magic weapons were not suitable for them, and the rock wall was incomparably hard. Each person could only open about 2 feet of the wall, and they were powerless to do more. However, even so, Li Zongbao estimated that there should be a distance of 3 to 4 miles. Moreover, as the height increased, the disciples flew up and down, which consumed a lot of magic power. Originally, they entered the passageway one by one, but now the passageway, which was more than 3 miles long, accommodated nearly 40 disciples of the Utopia faction. Alas, how deep is this karst cave? Li Zongbao sighed. When I came in, I didn't think it was so deep. Oh no, Senior Li. While Li Zongbao was thinking, Xiao Mao flew in and said hurriedly, "The river water has gradually stopped, but the sword cultivators are attacking again. There are also thousands of them." Hearing this, Li Zongbao was a little surprised, but it was not beyond his expectations. He waved his hand and said, "Disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my order. We will go out to meet the enemy. Let the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley come in." Yes. The rest of the disciples of the Utopia faction flew out, and the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley outside the karst cave lined up and flew in again. At this time, the river water had stopped flowing. However, in front of the defensive light curtain, nearly 3 feet of river water gathered and did not recede. Looking into the distance, there was a black mass of sword cultivators crossing the river water on their flying swords and rushing over. Good. My fellow cultivators, now is the key to our survival. The cultivators inside are breaking through the rock wall. We only need to hold on to the end, and we will be able to escape from here. Li Zongbao flew in the air and said coldly as his holy whip emitted a faint golden light. Senior Li. Yi Bei of the Changbai sect saluted and said, "Now that we have reached the most critical moment, we disciples of the Changbai sect do not dare to hide anything anymore. In this battle, we disciples of the Changbai sect will take the lead, and the disciples of the Utopia faction and the Cool Breeze Valley will help us on both sides. What do you think?" Great. Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, "I want to see the secret arts of the Changbai sect." All right. Yi Bei raised his hand and said loudly, "Junior brothers, we've been forced to a dead end now, and we've fulfilled our blood oath. Since it's like this, then let's allow those damnable sword cultivators to see who's the true cultivator of the sword. Kill." Then, nearly 3,000 disciples of the Changbai sect flew up. About 40% of the disciples were standing on flying swords like the sword cultivators, and all kinds of sword lights were shining. The other 60% of the disciples were using the flying technique, and they were holding the usual Taoist flying swords. However, they were all charging towards the sword cultivators without hesitation. Li Zongbao was stunned at first, but then he understood. He waved his hand and said, "Disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my command, kill! Kill!" Nearly 2,000 disciples of the Utopia faction flew up and activated their magic weapons to fight against the enemies. Just as Li Zongbao flew up, an old man said hurriedly, "Senior Li, don't fight against the enemies. You still need to stay in the middle and guard the karst cave. This karst cave is the key to our escape." Li Zongbao stopped in the air and thought for a while. Then he bowed and said, "Thank you, junior brother." Okay. The old man had already flown up and rushed into the battle. Then, Li Zongbao looked at the 2,000 disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley and said a few words to Jian Boming. Jian Boming waved his hand and said, "Disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley, listen to my command. We will split into 2 groups. One group will fly into the karst cave as soon as possible and open up the passage. Then we will immediately get into formation to fight against the enemies. The other group will follow me to fight against the enemies." Yes. Naturally, the 1,000 disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley who stayed behind turned around and flew into the air under Jian Boming's command. They formed a formation and rushed towards the sword cultivators. Suddenly, the karst cave that had been silent for a day and a night was filled with the sounds of killing again. However, the fight this time was different from the previous one. The sword cultivators were clearly delaying. They would either form a sword formation to attack the cultivators, or they would fight the cultivators on their flying swords. Whenever there was danger, they would immediately retreat. They did not fight to the death with the cultivators. On the other hand, the cultivators were stingy with their magic power and did not dare to forcefully chase after them. The flying techniques of the swordsmen were originally faster than that of the cultivators. As a result, in the time it took to brew a cup of tea, although there were many screams, most of them were cultivators who died. The number of swordsmen who fell into the river was even fewer. Of course, it was good that the cultivators today were not afraid of the sword cultivators. They still had some strength left in them, so it seemed that they were not in a bad situation. Chapter 25-32. Very quickly, another hour passed. Half of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples had entered the tunnel, but the progress of the tunnel was even more severe. After asking, Li Zongbao knew that the tunnel was less than 2 miles long. When the second batch of Cool Breeze Valley disciples prepared to enter the karst cave, another problem occurred. After an hour of fighting, not to mention the casualties, even the returning disciples had expended more than half of their spiritual power. They flew up the tunnel, used their spiritual power again, and flew back to the karst cave. The amount of spiritual power they could use was even less. When they entered the battle again, the situation was even more dangerous. In other words, these disciples could either stay here and kill sword cultivators or enter the cave to open the tunnel. If they did both, their lives would be in danger. Li Zongbao was a bit anxious, but he had no choice. This tunnel could not be opened by Xiaohua alone. He could only let the Cool Breeze Valley disciples open the tunnel as much as possible. Looking at the sword cultivator disciples, they saw that the cultivators who were fighting with them had suddenly retreated and lined up to retreat into the karst cave in the distance. Seeing that there were other disciples coming out of the karst cave, they naturally felt strange. After a while, the swordsmen who were in charge immediately realized that something was amiss. On one hand, they changed their tactics and tried their best to encourage the swordsmen to fight, while on the other hand, they hurriedly sent out swordsmen to report. Seeing this, Li Zongbao was even more anxious. At this time, it was the drawing sword and the nurturing sword disciples who were fighting. Not a single illusory swordsman had appeared. Even so, all the Dao sect cultivators should only have half of their dermic powers left in their bodies, right? As time passed, the spirit binding juice continued to devour his magic power. His previous thought of persevering for another 2 days and 2 nights was absolutely wishful thinking. All the paths were blocked, and he could only hope that the tunnel in the cave behind him would open up in time. The swordsmen changed their tactics, and their morale soared. The cultivators were completely suppressed, and many of the disciples fell from the sky, never to emerge from the river again. Looking at the Changbai sect disciples at the front, They activated their sword energy and stepped on their flying swords to meet the swordsmen. Their flying swords were filled with sword intent and sword chi. They were no different from the flying swords of the sword cultivators. The sword cultivators were shocked at first, but then they sneered and skillfully controlled their flying swords to fight against the Changbai sect disciples. At first, the two sides were evenly matched and the Changbai sect disciples even had a slight advantage. But in just the time it took to eat a meal, the Changbai sect disciples were at a disadvantage. After all, they were used to using magic to control their swords. At first, they could still concentrate, but as the danger increased, they started to make mistakes. As a result, naturally, many Changbai sect disciples used sword energy to fly on their swords while using their vital essence to activate their flying swords to fight against the swordsmen. This was supposed to be the best choice between the two sections. It should have been effective. However, after a short while, many disciples of the Changbai sect showed signs of pain. It seemed that there was a problem with the flying sword. After a long time, several disciples even fell into the river for no apparent reason. Therefore, the Changbai sect disciples were forced to take back their sword cultivator flying swords and focus on channeling their magic power to use their Dao sect flying swords to fight the enemy. Of course, even so, the Changbai sect disciples used the least amount of magic power. In this battle, they were the main force against the sword cultivators. Seeing the situation, Li Zongbao wanted to call the Changbai sect disciples back and prepare to enter the tunnel, but he gave up. Opening the tunnel was important, but they could not underestimate the enemy. If the Changbai sect disciples were to retreat, the sword cultivators would be able to reach the karst cave. Not to mention the tunnel could not be opened, all the cultivators would die. Senior brother Li, what's the situation? Xiao Hua quietly appeared behind Li Zongbao. Not good. Li Zongbao's face was dark. If we can't open the tunnel in an hour, when the thousands of disciples run out of magic power, we will all be souls under the sword of the sword cultivators. Sigh. Xiao Hua also sighed. He did not know how long the tunnel would be, but he knew that Li Zongbao was right. Even if he rushed up now, it would be like throwing a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. His magic power would not be able to resist many sword cultivators. I will follow the Cool Breeze Valley disciples to open the tunnel. The other disciples do not need to come. Xiao Hua looked at the Cool Breeze Valley disciples who were still waiting to enter the karst cave and said, "Okay." Li Zongbao glanced at Xiao Hua and nodded slightly. I will leave this matter to junior brother Xiao. We will definitely stall for time and leave you some time. Haha, let's pray that the rock wall is not too deep. Xiao Hua smiled. I only have so much magic power. If I run out of magic power and still can't open the rock wall, it will be useless no matter how much time we have. Then by Fei's secret technique. Li Zongbao did not forget to ask as he turned around. It's the real deal. Xiao Hua only answered with 4 words and then followed behind a Cool Breeze Valley disciple. Under Jian Boming's arrangement, the remaining Cool Breeze Valley disciples charged into the Dao sect cultivators who had already fallen into a declining battle. Xiao Hua had already flown to an extremely deep passageway when he saw a disciple flying out, followed by another disciple flying in. He then used his divine perception to scan the Cool Breeze Valley's disciples who stopped every 10 feet or so in the passageway. He sighed with emotion. There's strength in numbers, there's no mistake about that. Previously, I thought that I could open the tunnel by myself, but now that I see it, I really do not know the immensity of heaven and earth. How many miles have we gone? I'm afraid it's 6 to 7 miles. I haven't reached the end yet. If I were to open the tunnel by myself, I'm afraid that 1 mile would be the limit, right? However, if Xiao Hua's 1 mile was heard by others, they would definitely be dumbfounded. 1 mile was 150 feet. Other cultivators could only shoot out 1 or 2 feet, and that was already not bad. This guy directly shot out 100 feet. How could others live with this? As the Cool Breeze Valley disciples flew out one by one, Xiao Hua also flew into the tunnel. At this time, the tunnel was a few feet wide, barely enough for the two of them to brush past each other. Just as Xiao Hua was calculating where to go, a disciple above him transmitted a message. Reporting to senior brother Xiao, the senior brother in front has encountered a restriction. He is unable to break the formation. Please give us your orders. Ha ha ha. Great. Hearing this, Xiao Hua could not help but be overjoyed. Since they had reached the formation, How far could the surface be? You all can go out. I will take care of the rest. Xiaohua laughed loudly. You all send a message to senior brother Li. If there are no accidents, an hour should be enough. Yes. That disciple passed the message to his superiors. He immediately cupped his hands towards Xiaohua and flew down saying, Thank you for everything, senior brother Xiao. I will never forget this great favor. I don't dare. Xiaohua was all smiles as he watched that disciple land. However, who would have thought that the remaining disciples seemed to have made an agreement? Each of them said one sentence after another with such sincerity that Xiaohua really could not bear it. After waiting for the 40 disciples to leave, Xiaohua also flew to the top of the passage. He saw that there was a layer of restriction that was surging with blue light. The blue brilliance was like rippling water. If there were some fish swimming in it, it would definitely be like seawater. Hiss, Xiaohua scanned with his divine sense and took a deep breath. He said curiously, This is clearly the formation of a Dao sect cultivator. It is not a sword cultivator's sword formation. Then, Xiaohua used his Dharma eyes to look for a moment and found that the spirit binding juice had fused with this formation. Moreover, it was now dispersing into the rock wall along with the formation from time to time. I understand. Xiaohua nodded slightly. Since I can understand Buddhism and the Changbai sect disciples can practice the flying swords of sword cultivators, why can't sword cultivators practice my Dao sect spells and formations? This flowing ice valley formation probably did not have any special changes and it was used by that bastard Qin Jian. Fine. I don't care what kind of formation it is. Even if it is a sword formation, in my hands, it is just a piece of paper. Xiaohua waved his hand and took out the rabbit spirit talisman. He opened his Dharma eye and examined it. Then, he placed the spirit talisman on the weak point of the array. Immediately after, he grabbed the spirit talisman with his hand. The spirit talisman flashed with brilliance, and several small dots began to vibrate within the blue brilliance. All of the brilliance slowly overlapped, and slowly linked together. Finally, it formed a rapid whirlpool. When the whirlpool spun faster and faster, a hole several feet in size appeared within the array. Humph, I don't dare to touch you now. In a moment, I will show you how powerful I am. Xiaohua waved his hand again and threw 2 fire talismans at the hole in the rock wall. Then, he took a deep breath and activated his Dharma powers. With a slap of his hand, the yellow overturn ocean seal flew out. Quick! Xiaohua chanted and his hands formed a seal. The Dharma powers in his body surged and rushed into his fingertips. As the Dharma powers entered the overturn ocean seal, the overturn ocean seal didn't expand like before. Instead, it suddenly sucked in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and emitted a fierce flicker. Roar! Then, the dragon head coiled around the overturn ocean seal suddenly raised and actually let out a dragon roar. Moreover, the dragon body coiled around the overturn ocean seal also began to move. Attack! Xiaohua knew that his time was limited and didn't dare to be negligent. He pointed his finger again and saw the coiling dragon fly away from the overturn ocean seal. It opened its mouth in midair and actually sucked the overturn ocean seal into its mouth. Woo! A thunderous sound reverberated. The coiling dragon held the overturn ocean seal in its mouth and charged straight into the rock wall. Rumble! A loud sound rang out and the tunnel was opened by nearly 10 feet. Damn it! It is indeed powerful. The Dharma powers used are much less than before, but the effect is several times more. A complete Dharma treasure is indeed powerful. Although Xiaohua was looking forward to it, the result was really beyond his expectations. He originally thought that it would be good if he could push it out 30 to 40 feet. Who knew that it would actually be close to 10 feet? A secret technique is indeed a secret technique. A secret technique combined with a Dharma treasure is even more powerful. Xiaohua pondered, that Bai Fei took this opportunity to blackmail me, but every cultivator carries a humble heart to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Every cultivator racked their brains to find a 1 in 10,000 chance to raise their cultivation. Perhaps Bai Fei didn't have a chance like me. I'm afraid that he could only use this chance to thicken his face and ask me for a sword cultivator's sword technique. Forget it, who cares about him? I will benefit even more from this. Chapter 25-33. Thinking about this, Xiao Hua's view of Bai Fei gradually improved. Ignoring everything else, he urged his Fa Li to activate the seal of the overturning sea in one go. That earthen yellow dragon shape rushed out from Xiao Hua's hand again and again, and each time it penetrated deeper into the earth. Xiao Hua was secretly delighted. He understood that this layer of earth was about to reach its end. However, Xiao Hua was still happy too early. The seal of the overturning sea was a complete magic treasure. The amount of Fa Li required to activate it was definitely not ordinary. Xiao Hua was already much more careful, but seeing that the true yuan in his body was gradually drying up, the front was still pitch black and there were no signs of it reaching its end. "Granny, I won't fail, right?" Xiao Hua was somewhat restless. "How about, this young master uses the wishful staff again?" Secretly taking a deep breath, Xiao Hua very naturally activated his cultivation technique. Just as he activated it, he immediately came to a realization and hurriedly stopped his cultivation technique. This was because this was drinking poison to quench thirst. However, at this moment, Xiao Hua's heart suddenly flashed with a bolt of lightning. This young master is confused. That Qin Jian used the flowing ice valleys array to activate the spirit binding juice. Even if there is spirit binding juice on top of this forbidden technique, but most of it should be facing downwards. This place is already close to the top of the cliff. How could there be a lot of spirit binding juice? Thus, Xiao Hua impatiently opened his eyes. Sure enough, the azure color near him was very faint. It was not even different from what he usually saw. "Ha ha ha," Xiao Hua laughed loudly. He hurriedly waved his hand and a few pills entered his mouth. A wave of pure heaven and earth spiritual qi rushed into Xiao Hua's meridians. Xiao Hua took advantage of this to activate his cultivation technique. The long-lost true yuan immediately began to circulate. Although some true yuan suddenly disappeared, compared to the newly formed true yuan, it was still a bit less. This young master understands now. This spirit-binding juice was probably left in this young master's body before. Didn't that Bai Fei's jade amulet say that it was good? It can be removed with just a blow of the wind. There's no wind here, so I'll let it have wind. Xiao Hua waved his hand and several more elixirs entered his mouth. Immediately after, the immortal body bestowment technique and dragon transformation art circulated once more. The surrounding world spirit qi turned into tiny hurricanes and poured into Xiao Hua's body. Within his meridians and body, the amount of true origin that was regenerated increased. Very quickly, it exceeded the amount of true origin that was disappearing. Clearly, as the world spirit qi poured into Xiao Hua's body, the spirit-binding juice in Xiao Hua's body was gradually removed. "Watch me!" With true essence, what was there for Xiao Hua to be afraid of? He roared and no longer held back on his magic power. Almost all of his magic power was channeled into the sea overturning seal. Roar! The yellow dragon on the sea overturning seal was also as excited as Xiao Hua. It roared and held the seal in its mouth as it rushed into the soil again and again. Rumble! Xiao Hua had actually forcefully activated the seal of overturning sea to attack the passageway for nearly the time it took to eat a meal. He reckoned that he had probably opened up another several kilometers of passageway. This time, he heard a loud noise, and a strand of starlight was reflected in his eyes. Soon after, a gust of cold wind blew into the passageway. Great! Xiao Hua hastily withdrew his magic power and put away the sea overturning seal, afraid that it would attract the attention of the sword cultivators. He also didn't delay in the slightest. He took a few pills, turned around, and used the awakening lightning escape technique to fly into the cave. The battle inside the cave was really tragic. Every cultivator fought until the very last moment. The magic power in their bodies could only support them for a few breaths of time. Many people's gazes looked towards the cave from time to time. Everyone's figure also involuntarily gathered towards the cave. Li Zongbao and Xiao Hua had agreed on an hour. However, this hour had already passed, and he still hadn't received any message from Xiao Hua. I'm afraid that today will be the day of my fall. Li Zongbao urged his magic power. The immortal piercing whip drew a golden whip shadow and repelled a sword cultivator. Li Zongbao sighed and habitually looked towards the cave. Unfortunately, this time, it was still the same. There was no figure that surprised him. Hiss, eat my whip. Looking at the sword cultivator who was repelled by him flying towards him again, Li Zongbao was angry. When he was about to urge his magic power again, he saw a crimson-red messaging charm flying in front of his eyes. Xiaohua! Li Zongbao almost cried with joy. There were too many surprises in this world. How could he, who practiced the parting love treasure mirror, endure? When he took the messaging charm and scanned it with his divine thought, he immediately shouted, "Fellow cultivators, Xiaohua of the Imperial Thunder Sect has opened the passage. We will act according to the previous discussion." Senior Li. Not far away, Bai Fei was still alive. He hurriedly said, "Don't forget about me. You're the first to go out." Li Zongbao was extremely disdainful and pointed with his finger. "Thank you, Senior Li," Bai Fei shouted. He left his opponent and immediately rushed into the cave. Seeing Bai Fei run away, the disciples were a little confused. "Don't panic. Disciples of the Utopia faction, listen to my command. Turn the formation outward and let the disciples of the Changbai sect and the Cool Breeze Valley go first." "Yes." The disciples of the Utopia faction shouted loudly and responded. "Ha, ha, ha, Senior Li, you've underestimated the disciples of the Changbai sect." Yi Bei was injured, but he shouted straightforwardly, "I will lead the disciples of the Changbai sect to accompany the fellow cultivators of the Utopia faction. Let the disciples of the Cool Breeze Valley go first." "Good. A friend in need is a friend indeed." Li Zongbao clapped his hands and said, "Junior Yi, you're my friend. There's also me." Jian Boming's injuries were more serious, but he was also full of pride. He flew into the air and said, "Let the injured disciples and those who don't have enough magic power go first. We'll bring up the rear." "Ha ha ha ha, there's also me." Xiao Mao was also injured, but he also flew to stand beside Li Zongbao. "Good." Everyone laughed heartily. However, their divine senses scanned the surroundings vigilantly. When the disciples of the three factions heard the words of the three people, even though they had a strong desire to live, they did not dare to be too presumptuous. Not to mention, there were many disciples who stood in front of Li Zongbao and the others, ready to fight to the death. In fact, the situation was as such. The passage could only allow 2 people to go out at the same time. If they left early, they could escape. But if they left late, or even slightly late, how could they escape? Don't forget, there were thousands of swordsmen. How could they let the cultivators escape so easily? Li Zongbao, Yi Bei, and Jian Boming's words were their final plan. They knew in their hearts that among the 6,000 cultivators, there were about 2,000 who would not be able to escape. The 3 of them would be the last 3. Hoping that they could save more cultivators by fighting to the death, the injured disciples rushed into the karst cave in an orderly manner, but it was troublesome to enter the passageway. Under everyone's command, the entrance to the passageway was a mess. Many disciples rushed in, causing chaos. "Xiao Mao, you go and command them." Li Zongbao pointed and shouted. "Yes, I understand." Xiao Mao received the order and hurriedly flew to the entrance of the karst cave. Li Zongbao's voice rang in his ears again. "Xiao Hua entrusted you to me, so I have to think for you. When the time is right, enter the passage." Xiao Mao bit his lips slightly and did not reply. He only flew to the entrance of the passage and scolded, "Don't rush. You go first. You follow behind." Alas, this is a real man. Li Zongbao saw that Xiao Mao did not respond and knew what Xiao Mao was thinking. He secretly shook his head and waved the holy piercing whip again to command the disciples of the Utopia faction to resist the crazy attacks of the swordsmen. As long as one was a human, there would always be competition in their hearts. Even cultivators were the same. If there was no one to lead them and they saw someone else enter the passage before them, they would definitely mutter, "Why is it you and not me? When will I be able to enter the passage?" But if there was someone to command first, the cultivator had a rule in his heart. He knew that it would be his turn soon, so he would listen to the command of others. Not to mention that Xiao Mao was now famous for his fighting prowess. Everyone was very convinced by him. When Xiao Mao came to mediate, order was quickly restored. More and more people left, and fewer people stayed. However, the attacks of the swordsmen did not stop. In fact, they were even more ferocious. Li Zongbao and the others could not hold on any longer. Seeing that there were still more than 3,000 people left, Li Zongbao sighed and looked up. Tens of thousands of swordsmen activated their flying swords. Every time they would take away a life. Every drop of blood sprinkled into the river. To be able to save 3,000 people is already good enough. Li Zongbao thought to himself and shouted again, "Fellow cultivator Jian, fellow cultivator Yi, you and the others should also prepare to leave. We will leave as many as we can. Let the disciples closest to the karst cave retreat." Yi Bei saw that there were fewer and fewer people in the karst cave and shouted loudly, "Ha ha ha! Damn it! You're squeezing me to death!" Just when Li Zongbao was about to agree, he heard a bright laughter in the small karst cave. "Senior brother Xiao is here. Senior brother Xiao is back." Everyone in the karst cave cheered loudly, as if they had suddenly found a pillar of support. "Xiao Hua, why did you come back?" Li Zongbao's heart warmed, and he actually complained secretly. "Big brother." Xiao Mao was also very surprised. "Walk slowly, don't be anxious." Xiao Hua glanced at the somewhat messy karst cave and said coldly, "Since this Xiao is here, all of you can leave. Don't worry, no one will be left behind." "Yes, yes." A few disciples who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to enter the passage immediately calmed down. "You command here." Xiao Hua instructed Xiao Mao, "Whoever dares to act recklessly, directly kill them." "Yes." Xiao Mao replied loudly. "Fellow cultivators, you and the others slowly retreat. Don't mess up the formation." Xiao Hua saw that the situation was urgent and didn't say much. He slowly flew out of the karst cave and stood in mid-air like a proud god. His voice slowly rippled in the karst cave without any hint of panic. It was as if in Xiao Hua's eyes, these thousands of swordsmen were just dust. "Yes, we understand." Nearly 3,000 disciples shouted in unison, and their morale immediately surged. Although Xiao Hua was only standing in mid-air and had only spoken a few words, his appearance was actually more powerful than any magic treasure or divine ability. Not only did the hearts of the Dao sect disciples stabilize, even the sword cultivators were somewhat afraid, and their momentum of attack actually slowed down. Chapter 25-34. A moment later, many cultivators slowly retreated, and there were fewer enemies in front of them. The sword cultivators clamored again. Seeing this, Xiao Hua slowly flew to the front of the cultivators. "Junior brother Xiao." Li Zongbao called out worriedly. "Senior brother Li, tell junior brother Jian and junior brother Yi to prepare to retreat. I'll be here to block them." Xiao Hua said confidently. "However, quickly send a message to them. When I count to 5, immediately close your eyes and use your divine sense to retreat to the cave. Don't open your eyes and don't use your divine sense to look at me. Whoever dares to, don't kill them." "Yes, I know." Li Zongbao was overjoyed. Knowing that Xiao Hua had another method, he hurriedly sent a message to Jian Boming and Yi Bei. Xiao Hua waved his hand, holding the wishful steel staff in his hand. He actually stood there and began to count. The sword cultivators were all stunned. They didn't know what Xiao Hua was doing. Several sword lights attacked Xiao Hua, but they were all easily defeated by Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff. When Xiao Hua counted to 5, all the Dao sect cultivators closed their eyes together and released their divine sense with great ease, retreating towards the cave. Xiao Hua pointed his finger, and a wave of Xiantian true water surged out like a blue wave, engulfing many of the sword cultivators closest to the cultivators. Moreover, the Xiantian true water separated the sword cultivators from the cultivators. I forgot." Xiao Hua suddenly realized. "If I use this Xiantian true water, I'm afraid I can directly kill these sword cultivators. Why do I have to use so much strength to open the passage? Moreover, this Xiantian true water may also be able to eliminate the spirit binding juice?" But then, the screams of the swordsmen could be heard. Hundreds of swordsmen lost their primordial spirits and fell from the sky like puppets. However, many of the other swordsmen had strong primordial spirits. They struggled to break free from the illusion and screamed in fear as they flew into the distance. "Hee, the sword cultivators are all flying away. Who will I kill?" Xiao Hua laughed. "Moreover, I don't dare to use this true water casually. Who knows how to eliminate the spirit-binding juice? Of course, among the thousands of sword cultivators, there were still many sword cultivators with brilliant methods. They each used their secret techniques to resist the true water. At the same time, they used their flying swords to attack the true water, wanting to kill Xianxia after he exhausted his magic power. Unfortunately, they were wrong again. Xianxia's true water. Junior brother Xiao, how is it? Li Zongbao naturally did not dare to open his eyes, nor did he dare to use his divine sense to scan the area. When he saw that most of the cultivators in the karst cave were gone, he sent a voice transmission. Senior brother Li, if you want to wait, you can stay. Let's go out together. Xiaohua indifferently replied. Good. Li Zongbao was very happy. He knew that he was right to call Xiaohua over on a whim. After Li Zongbao urged Jian Boming, Yi Bei, and the others to leave, he called for Xiao Mao and Xiaohua. Xiaohua slowly withdrew the innate primordial water and looked at the dozen or so disciples of the three sects who stood there like puppets not far from him. He coldly smiled and said, "In this world, there are always some people who think that other people's words are all lies." Then, he ignored them and flew to the tunnel. Let's go. You and I are the last three, Xiaohua said with a smile. Okay, Xiao Mao will go first. Xiaohua will bring up the rear. Li Zongbao instructed. Xiao Mao didn't refuse. He flew into the tunnel and used his last bit of magic power to rush to the cave entrance. Xiaohua waited for Li Zongbao to fly into the tunnel. He turned around and looked at the sword cultivators who also rushed into the cave. He stretched out his hand and curled his fingers, as if he was calling them over. Xiaohua's actions scared the sword cultivators into retreating a few steps. They waited until Xiaohua's figure disappeared. Then, they gathered their courage and flew in. Everyone looked and discussed for a moment. Like the cultivators of the Dao sect, a portion of the disciples flew into the tunnel on their flying swords. The other disciples flew out of the cave. However, in just the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, within this passageway, there was a continuous rumbling sound of explosions. The fire talismans that Xiaohua left in the passageway exploded one after another, killing all the swordsmen that were blocked by the restriction of the flowing ice valley within the passageway. Even the restriction of flowing ice valley and all the passageways above it were destroyed without a trace by the fire talisman. Above flowing ice valley, the thin crescent moon was like a willow eyebrow on a branch. It was indiscernible and boundless. It couldn't compare to the stars in the night sky. The rushing river water created waves. The sound of waves drifted endlessly in the valley. However, the noise of the night sky couldn't hide the slaughter in the mortal world. Countless screams, sounds of collisions, and the sound of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth exploding could be heard without end. At a mountain stream not far away from this massacre, under a protruding eagle-like beak, a series of black shadows suddenly rushed out. These black shadows seemed to be really intertwined with each other, but when these black shadows rushed into the air, they immediately fell on the protruding walls between the cliffs with a plop-plop sound. These black shadows appeared in a flash. However, the falling black shadows were continuous. When the last thin and tall black shadow appeared in the air with 2 black shadows in his hands, there were actually over 100 black shadows that fell onto the cliffs. Ha ha ha! That thin and tall black shadow was Xiaohua. He looked at Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao on his left and right and laughed. If it wasn't for this little brother having some strength, I'm afraid that senior brother Li would be the first cultivator to fall to his death. I'm afraid I won't fall to my death. I'll be crushed to death. It was rare for Li Zongbao to joke. It was actually quite amusing. That's right. Xiaohua flew out from the passage. How could he have known that many cultivators who flew out from the passage already had no magic power left in their bodies? Even if they used flying techniques, they couldn't. Fortunately, Xiaohua flew at the end and had enough strength. Only then was he able to push over 100 cultivators out. At this moment, behind Xiaohua, there was a series of rumbling explosions. The entire mountain rock was shaking. Senior brother Li, fellow Taoists. Xiaohua's divine sense swept out. He already knew that the cultivators who flew out earlier were either hiding nearby or flying out to meet the enemy. He immediately shouted, "This place was originally hidden. However, with so many disciples flying out earlier, I'm afraid it has already attracted the attention of sword cultivators. Moreover, I destroyed the passage and attracted the swordsmen. You all have already taken medicinal pills and your true essence has been regenerated. Don't wait any longer. Quickly leave Flowing Ice Valley. As for the next step, it won't be too late for us to discuss it later. Alright. After flying out of the restriction, Li Zongbao also took medicinal pills in succession. Currently, true essence was slowly being regenerated in his meridians. It was naturally impossible for him to fight, but it was enough for him to fly. Quick, there are fleeing Dao sect cultivators here. Several hundred feet away, there was an extremely ear-piercing sword cry. Dozens of divine senses quickly swept over. Let's go! Li Zongbao struggled to fly into the air. With a wave of his hand, he determined the direction and flew in a certain direction. Jian Boming and Yi Bei also flew up. They each organized the disciples of their respective sects and flew behind Li Zongbao and the other two. Looking at the pitch-black night sky and sweeping it with his divine sense, Xiaohua didn't feel that there was anything special about the place Li Zongbao was heading to. However, when he thought about the strangeness of not meeting a second Dao sect disciple in the underground cave, Xiaohua didn't have any other thoughts. He would just follow Li Zongbao. Where do you think you're going? After flying for less than half an incense stick's worth of time, a sword cry soared into the sky from Xiaohua's right hand, followed by an angry roar that reverberated in the night sky. A beautiful sword light flickered, letting out a roar like a wild beast, the night wind, the sword cry, and soon after, a rumbling sound of thunder could be heard. Quick! Amidst the thunderous roar, there was a light shout. A rainbow was born from the opposite side of the sword light. In an instant, it seemed to have traversed hundreds of feet and rushed into the sword light. Crackle! Crackle! It sounded like beans being fried in a hot pan. At the same time, there was another deep voice. Beside the rainbow, thousands of golden threads streaked across the sky and rushed into the sword light. They let out an extremely sharp CC sound. Roar! The sword light let out a strange sword cry. It was like the cries of thousands of birds and the roars of hundreds of beasts. It covered the sound of the rainbow and the golden threads. Even the sword light, which was several hundred feet in size, suppressed the rainbow and the golden threads. Rumble! After the sword cry, there was the sound of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth exploding and colliding. The sound waves and air waves washed away the mountain rocks and the river water. Countless lights and shadows swayed and illuminated several hundred feet in the sky. After seeing the sword light, a tall swordsman wearing a red sword suit appeared. Who else could it be but Qin Jian, whose portrait was hung all over the Sky Patrol city. The figure behind the rainbow was a white-haired female cultivator wearing a Taoist robe from the Cool Breeze Valley. As for behind the golden threads, it was the cultivator from the Utopia faction, Chu Hui, whom Xiaohua and the others were familiar with. However, when Xiaohua and the others saw it, it was after the brilliance flashed. Two blood-curdling screams rang out at almost the same time. Hundreds of sword lights broke through the rainbow and golden threads, rapidly piercing through the bodies of the two people. The almost invisible protective golden light flickered, unable to block the sharp sword lights. After the sword lights pierced through their bodies, the two cultivators' corpses fell into the river water. Uncle Chu Hui! Li Zongbao's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Uncle Su Bo! Jian Boming also sighed. Let's go! Xiaohua saw Qin Jian's divine thought sweep over here and was very anxious. He had already seen clearly that when the flying swords entered Su Bo and Chu Hui's bodies, the protective golden light didn't have much effect. He knew that their magic power hadn't recovered. They must have rushed out from the exit of the Flowing Ice Valley. Their cultivation levels were not as high as Qin Jian's, so it wasn't strange that they both died. Qin Jian! Li Zongbao's eyes were red and his magic power was surging. He wanted to rush over. What's wrong with you? Xiaohua saw this and pulled Li Zongbao back. He poured magic power into Li Zongbao's meridians and sealed Li Zongbao's true core strength. How can you be his opponent? Xiaohua grabbed Li Zongbao and flew up. Chapter 25-35. Li Zongbao regained his composure. An indescribable expression flashed across his eyes. I know. I am not his opponent, but... Li Zongbao wanted to say that he had an uncontrollable urge to kill Qin Jian with his immortal piercing whip, but Xiao Hua said anxiously, but if you want to take revenge, you have to wait until the next opportunity. Although Xiao Mao also wanted to kill Qin Jian, he knew that he was not Qin Jian's opponent. Perhaps Qin Jian would not personally make a move, but they were not the opponents of the other swordsmen. Thus, he hurriedly activated his magic power and flew away with Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao, who knew that Qin Jian's spiritual sense would detect the movements of Xiao Hua and the others. While the swordsmen were chasing after them, he also stepped on his flying sword and easily chased after them. This is bad. Xiao Hua frowned. If it was a normal day, he might not be afraid of Qin Jian. However, he only had less than 50% of his magic power left. How could he fight with Qin Jian? But looking at the thousands of cultivators, they were really like monkeys fleeing from a tree. They were all panicking, and their faces were filled with extreme fear. Qin Jian's reputation was really like the sun in the sky. After today, it would be even more resounding. At this time, perhaps only I can fight. Xiao Hua slowly stopped and coldly turned around. He did not even take out his magic treasures like the wishful staff. He just stood in the air with his hands behind his back. Big brother. Xiao Mao was shocked and was about to shout. Li Zongbao also stopped. You all quickly leave. Xiao Hua said coldly. Don't turn back. If possible, don't let these cultivators talk. Are you confident? Li Zongbao's eyes narrowed as he only asked one question. Yes. Xiao Hua replied. You all settle these cultivators down and quickly return. Okay, don't worry big brother. Xiao Mao said anxiously, as long as we settle them down, immediately. Hee, they naturally have their own places to go. Why do they need me to settle them down? Li Zongbao laughed and took out his immortal piercing whip. Xiao Mao came to his senses and smiled. That's right, big brother. This time, you can't get rid of us. And that's good too. Xiao Hua looked at Qin Jian and the swordsman chasing after Qin Jian. He waved his hand and said, Come with me. After saying that, Xiao Hua brought Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao and flew in another direction. The disciples of the Utopia faction, the Changbai sect, and the Cool Breeze Valley were led by Jian Boming, Yi Bei, and the others to fly away under Li Zongbao's orders. Qin Jian was not an idiot. When he saw that the three of them had separated, he knew that it was a trap. He waved his hand and ordered the swordsmen to chase after them while he continued to chase after the disciples of the three sects. Qin Jian, do you want to know where Ling Yunwu is? Seeing this, Xiao Hua waved his hand to signal Xiao Mao and Li Zongbao to leave first, while he himself stopped and stood quietly in midair as he spoke indifferently via voice transmission. Ling Yunwu? Qin Jian frowned slightly. When he saw Xiao Hua's Imperial Thunder Sect's Taoist robe, he suddenly realized something and said in shock, You're the horrifying phoenix? That's right, Qin Jian. You actually know me. I've been chasing after you for a long time. I didn't expect to meet you here. Xiao Hua's body was surrounded by a hurricane, and countless spiritual qi of heaven and earth gathered around him. He looked extremely arrogant. Ha ha ha, you're actually the horrifying phoenix. Qin Jian saw that Xiao Hua's appearance was similar to the one in the voice transmission, and that he was in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. He had already thrown the thousands of disciples of the three sects aside and waved his hand to signal his disciples to chase after Xiao Hua. At the same time, he stopped and flew toward Xiao Hua. I really didn't expect this. I just casually tampered with the flowing ice valley and wanted to kill a few cultivators in the early stage of the golden core stage to satisfy my craving. I didn't expect that the famous horrifying phoenix would be attracted here. Qin Jian was really happy. He knew that killing Xiao Hua was much better than killing thousands of cultivators. These thousands of cultivators were saved by you alone, right? Qin Jian looked at Xiao Hua, who was standing quietly, and then looked at the Foundation establishment stage cultivators who were fleeing in the distance. He asked with interest, I didn't expect that you, a Foundation establishment stage cultivator, could actually do something that even Golden Core stage cultivators couldn't do. Just now, the two Golden Core stage cultivators from the Utmost Happiness faction and Cool Breeze Valley rushed out of the Spirit Stone mine with their lives on the line. They only had 1,000 people with them. You saved more than 6,000 people in one go. You really live up to your reputation. You flatter me. Xiaohua cupped his hands and smiled. This little one's reputation is really nothing. Compared to Brother Qin, I'm still far behind. Brother Qin must have been in charge of this flowing ice valley for many years, right? This scheme really opened the eyes of this Xiao. It scared this Xiao so much that this Xiao's heart is beating wildly. Haha, this is nothing. Qin Jian laughed when he heard this. He carefully flew closer to Xiaohua and said, however, to be praised by the terrifying phoenix, this old man is also very happy. Of course, today can't be considered perfect. I only killed 3 golden core stage cultivators and more than 10,000 foundation establishment stage cultivators. If I can take the terrifying phoenix's head and kill the 6,000 cultivators, then it can be considered perfect. That's right, that's right. Xiaohua also clapped his hands and said, this little one only saved 6,000 cultivators and killed Qin Mu Ming and Liang Qi. If I can kill Brother Qin, then today can be considered perfect. Ha ha ha, great minds think alike. Qin Jian also clapped his hands and said, I didn't expect the terrifying phoenix to have such lofty ambitions at such a young age. She's only in the foundation establishment stage. This old man really admires the new generation. I wouldn't dare. The new generation in Flowing Ice Valley pushes the old one, and the old one dies on the beach. Brother Qin, why don't you be the old one? Xiaohua said with a smile. What? Qin Jian's words were also followed by Xiaohua's sarcastic retort, which was out of his expectations. When he understood, he almost held his stomach and laughed. Ha ha ha, terrifying phoenix, terrifying phoenix. You're really terrifying, extremely terrifying. Qin Jian laughed until he was rocking back and forth. Seeing Xiaohua rubbing his nose and enjoying himself, he sneered and said, Xiaohua, you've been talking for so long. Has the spirit-binding juice in your body been removed? Has your true essence recovered? So Brother Qin saw through it long ago? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. The heaven and earth spirit qi around him swarmed into his body. How could others not see through it? Humph, you just came out from the array I set up. How could I not know? But you're different from those 2 bullshit golden core stage cultivators. Qin Jian straightened his back in an instant. You're the opponent I've admired for a long time. Ling Yunwu died in your hands, Yu Ming went crazy because of you, and Zhong Haoshuan also died in your hands. If I can't have a fair fight with you, how can I be at ease? Damn it, you should have said so earlier. Hearing this, Xiaohua sat down cross-legged. With a wave of his hand, several pills entered his mouth. He actually closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. You! Seeing Xiaohua like this, Qin Jian was stunned again. Which cultivator dared to do this when fighting with him? However, his eyes flashed with a trace of fierceness. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He actually didn't make a sound and really waited in the air. Wrong, wrong, definitely wrong. Although Xiaohua sat down cross-legged casually, how could he peacefully cultivate in front of the infamous Qin Jian? How could he treat his words as true? This doesn't make sense. Qin Jian was able to kill thousands of foundation establishment stage cultivators, and even boasted that he was stronger than Tu Hong. How could he be so righteous? However, no matter if it was a Dao sect cultivator or a sword cultivator swordsman, they were both wretched and righteous people. Not to mention Immortal Bright Sword and Li Xiubai. The closest ones were Ji Yi and Li Zongbao. They were both upright people. However, even if Qin Jian wasn't as vicious and merciless as Tu Hong, he definitely wasn't a kind person. Based on how Qin Jian cleanly killed Xia Hui and Su Bo, Xiaohua knew that dealing with Qin Jian was different from dealing with Ji Yi. But what plans does Qin Jian have? Xiaohua was bewildered. While exercising the heaven-human body bestowment technique and the cultivation technique he was practicing, he tried his best to refine the pills and absorb the natural energies to restore his magic power. At the same time, he unleashed his Buddhist consciousness and scanned the area several hundred feet around him. It is impossible for Qin Jian to give me the time to recover. So why did he tell me so much? I want to recover my vital energy. What does he want to recover? Could it be that he used up a huge amount of vital energy to kill those 2 golden core stage cultivators? After another half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua's heart was even more shocked. It was indescribably strange. What was even stranger was that Qin Jian really stood with his hands behind his back and looked at him with a smile. Suddenly, a face flashed in Xiaohua's heart. A pretty face. It was that female sword cultivator called Gu Yu. Formless sword. Xiaohua's heart jumped and he almost shouted out. Gu Yu. I'm afraid she's Qin Jian's nephew. Thinking of this, Xiaohua slightly opened his hand and opened his delirium breaker Dharma eye. He carefully examined his surroundings. However, within several feet of him, there was only the usual brilliance of heaven and earth spiritual qi. There was only a slightly rich blue brilliance. Strange. Could it be that I'm judging a gentleman with my own mean heart? Xiaohua secretly muttered. Just as he was about to close his Dharma eye, an indescribable sharpness came from his body. Instantly, goosebumps appeared all over his body. Xiaohua's eyes turned. His delusion breaker Dharma eye was still open. He looked around, but his body moved a little. He smiled and said, Brother Qin is indeed benevolent. This is far from the heartless and unscrupulous people in the rumors. As he said that, his other hand took out a few more pills and put them into his mouth. Hee. Can rumors be trusted? Qin Jian's smile did not change. He said, the rumors say that the terrifying phoenix is a person with a phoenix Dharma body. He's several feet tall and has a bloody mouth. He's also good at lightning escape and controlling lightning. But little friend? He seems to be too weak to even stand a gust of wind? Oh, that's right. Little friend is in the late stage of foundation establishment. This pill is too fierce. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. This old man has plenty of time to wait for you. Cough cough. Xiaohua seemed to be choked by the cold wind. His body trembled rapidly. After a moment he sighed and said, This little one is so handsome. To think that the rumors say that I'm like that. This little one is really disappointed. Chapter 25:36. As he spoke, a hint of coldness flashed through Xiaohua's eyes. Just now, he clearly saw that in the instant his body moved, all the lights within 100 feet to the left were the same as before. Then, a few feet above his head, a faintly discernible golden thread suddenly stopped. It really is the invisible sword. And it's actually moving so slowly from 100 feet away. Xiaohua sighed in his heart. Qin Jian is an illusory swordsman, but he's actually so guarded against me. I can only say that he's a scheming person. He, of course, if not for my reputation, he wouldn't be so cautious. However, it's also strange. I've clearly been hit by the spirit binding juice and my magic power is greatly depleted. Why didn't he directly attack? Why did he use such a sinister method? To act in secret. Isn't this giving me a chance to catch my breath? Xiaohua really didn't understand. Unfortunately, he didn't know that those who were used to scheming would treat scheming as their everything. Qin Jian was famous for his ambushes during the Sword Dao War and was proud of it. He didn't dare to say that this was his only method, but once he made a move, the first thing he would think of was how to set up an ambush. This was already a habit. Moreover, Xiaohua's reputation was really resounding among sword cultivators. Ling Yunwu, Yu Ming, Zhong Haoshuan and the others might not be comparable to Qin Jian, but they were also illusory swordsmen. Qin Jian was still quite afraid of Xiaohua. Besides, Xiaohua actually saved nearly 7,000 cultivators and opened up the spirit stone mine in Flowing Ice Valley. How could the spirit binding juice be effective? Qin Jian was almost certain that Xiaohua's weak appearance was for him to see. It was a trap set up for him, waiting for him to fall for it. Since that was the case, Qin Jian naturally had to use his most proficient invisible golden thread sword as a method to kill Xiaohua. According to Qin Jian's thoughts, even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be able to easily detect this invisible sword. Unfortunately, not only did Xiaohua encounter Gu Yu before, he also had the delusion breaker Dharma eye and the hand of karma. Qin Jian's most prideful technique was extremely clumsy in the eyes of Xiaohua. Furthermore, Xiaohua even took the opportunity to consume a pill to recover his mana. After a short moment, Xiaohua moved again. Sure enough, that strand of golden thread stopped again. Cough cough. Xianxia used his hand to cover his mouth and laughed bitterly. Brother Qin's spirit-binding juice is truly formidable. I've rested for so long, yet I still haven't completely recovered. Thank you for your righteousness, Brother Qin, for allowing me to have time to consume medicinal pills. If that's the case, please don't show any mercy when you attack later. This is a fair fight between us. Even if I die, I will die honorably. Qin Jian said righteously. Cough cough, since Brother Qin has said so, this little one really can't bear to do it. Xianxia was a bit embarrassed, and as the two of them were talking, the golden thread slowly approached again. Seeing that Xianxia didn't speak, the golden thread stopped again, as if it was trying to guess whether Xianxia was paying attention. Seeing that Xianxia didn't pay attention, it slowly moved again. However, Xiaohua's casual movement, even if it was a tremble of his shoulder or a twitch of his finger, that golden thread would stop. Only when Xianxia didn't make any further movements would it slowly descend. Therefore, after the time it took to eat a meal, that invisible sword of golden thread was only a few feet away from Xiaohua's head. Seeing that Qin Jian was so cautious, Xiaohua almost laughed involuntarily. Suddenly, he thought of fishing. It was as if the golden thread above his head was the hook, and he was the big fish. The hook was trying to approach him, afraid that it would disturb him, and as the fisherman, Qin Jian, had an expression as if a mountain was pressing down on him. However, from Xiaohua's point of view, it was as if he was the fisherman and Qin Jian had become the big fish. Yes, fish or human or butterfly, who could say for sure? Seeing that the golden thread was already 2 feet away, the golden thread suddenly accelerated, preparing to pierce Xiaohua's head with lightning speed. At this time, Xiaohua suddenly moved again and said with a smile, "This little one forgot to say something." When Xiaohua moved, Qin Jian habitually paused, and the golden thread stopped in midair. Qin Jian asked, "Little friend, what do you want to say?" Xiaohua laughed heartily, and his left hand covered his head with his robe. He suddenly used the heaven and earth in the sleeve technique and said, "Ha ha ha, this little one forgot to say thank you." When Qin Jian saw that Xiaohua actually covered his head with his robe, he knew that the situation was not good. However, his sword technique had just been used, and the invisible golden thread sword was in a state where it could not be released, so it was impossible for him to control the flying sword as he wished. Moreover, Xiaohua wanted him to be in this critical state. The transcendence energy in his body was suddenly sent out, and in an instant, the invisible golden thread sword was covered in his robe, cutting off the connection between Qin Jian and the invisible sword. Without waiting for Qin Jian to activate his sword origin, the invisible sword was sent into Xiaohua's space. After all, the invisible sword was only invisible on the surface, and Qin Jian had not cultivated it to the level of drawing it into the void. Xiaohua's heaven and earth in the sleeve technique caught him off guard. Even Taoist Jingxi's natal magic weapon was taken away by Xiaohua, so how could Qin Jian's invisible sword escape from Xiaohua's evil clutches? You! Qin Jian was so angry that his arms were trembling. You're going too far. He was truly speechless. He was truly infuriated. He had schemed for so long and wasted so much time and effort, but in the end, it was all for Xiaohua. Although he didn't know how Xiaohua discovered his invisible sword, and how he could accurately take it away, did he even need to ask? Qin Jian waved his hand without saying anything. An array of sword light shot out from his hand. Roar! A sharp wolf's howl shook the surroundings, like a hungry wolf howling at the bright moon on a full moon night. Qin Jian's sword intent is actually seeing an extremely ferocious wolf's head gradually appear in the sword light, and that bloody and murderous intent passed through the wolf's head and covered the area around Xiaohua. Xiaohua was stunned. He had participated in the battle of Dao cultivators for a long time, and had seen many sword cultivators' sword intent, such as plum blossoms, flowing water, tall mountains and so on. However, this was the first time he saw a wolf's head. Seeing the wolf's head, Xiaohua suddenly thought of Taoist Bright Sword's little deer. Damn it, Qin Jian's sword intent is so ferocious, it can't be stronger than Taoist Bright Sword, right? The wolf's head flashed, and the ferocious sword intent passed through space and firmly enveloped Xiaohua. That sword intent stirred up the ferocity in Xiaohua's heart, and waves of murderous intent repeatedly attacked Xiaohua's mind. Moreover, Xiaohua's blood vessels expanded, and the blood essence in his entire body surged, as if it was about to burst out of his body. Hiss! Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. Qin Jian's sword intent is murderous, ferocious, and the wolf's head directly targets one's heart. This murderous intent is only an external cause, but it can actually lure out the murderous intent in this young master's heart. Qin Jian's ability is indeed superhuman. Murderous intent is human nature. Although Xiaohua could silently guard his heart and act according to the Tao of Heaven, it did not mean that there was no murderous intent in his heart. The Tao cultivator battle had been going on for close to 10 years, and the number of swordsmen and cultivators who coveted Xiaohua was truly innumerable. The murderous intent in his heart had long reached the heavens. Now, Qin Jian's ferocious wolf sword intent had instantly ignited the desire in his heart. Although he knew that it was inappropriate, and already knew the intention of Qin Jian's wolf's head sword intent, it was still hard to suppress the impulse, and immediately ignited his ambition or murderous intent. Come, it's just a wolf's head sword intent. Do you think this young master is afraid of you? Xiaohua laughed wildly, and with a wave of his hand, the seal of the overturning sea appeared in midair. The magic power in his body surged, and a dragon's roar resounded, even more ferocious than the wolf's head. Roar! With a roar, an earthen yellow dragon shape rapidly swam in midair. With the seal in its mouth, it pounced towards the enormous sword light of the wolf's head. The seal of the overturning sea was so huge. Although the wolf's head had already expanded to several dozen zhang, it was still suppressed by the seal into a kind of flat sword light. There was even a large depression in front of the wolf's head, and the sword light inside was faintly flickering, as if it was about to be extinguished. Seal of the overturning sea? Although Qin Jian already had a high opinion of Xiaohua, when he saw the seal of the overturning sea, his expression still changed. Ji Yi also died in your hands? Ha ha ha, Ji Yi is not the first, and you will not be the last. Xiaohua's voice was filled with wildness. The magic power in his body surged out, and the yellow dragon rushed to the front of the wolf's head, and spat out the seal like a pearl. Wah! With a sharp sound, the seal of the overturning sea once again expanded. The light around it suddenly retracted, forming a black hole. The space around the black hole was slightly distorted, and the entire black hole was pressing down on the enormous wolf's head. Roar! The wolf's head that was formed by thousands of sword lights let out a sorrowful cry. All of the sword lights were like fireflies at the end of autumn, and were instantly extinguished. Nascent soul. His strength is actually close to that of a nascent soul. Qin Jian couldn't help but groan when he saw that the seal of overturning the sea had released such a powerful aura even before it collided with the sword light. He was secretly astonished. However, this situation was also extremely normal. If Xiaohua didn't have such strength, how could he have killed so many illusory swordsmen? However, Qin Jian's eyes were also very bright. The sword energy in his body surged, and he waved his hands. Open! Rumble, with a loud sound that shook the earth, the seal of the overturning sea collided with the thousands of sword lights, and directly scattered the wolf's head. Moreover, the wolf's head was pushed back dozens of feet before it finally stopped. This collision created a hurricane that not only completely disrupted the spiritual energy in the air, but also lifted the water in the flowing ice valley into the air. Satisfying. Xiaohua's eyes were slightly red. He was extremely satisfied with the effects of the seal of the overturning sea. Similarly, he waved his hands and shouted. The yellow dragon once again swam in the air, and the seal of the overturning sea also emitted an intense yellow light, and fell into the yellow dragon's mouth. Wang wang wa. Just as the seal of the overturning sea was crazily absorbing the spiritual energy in the air, a ray of sword light suddenly appeared in the void where the light was extinguished. That sword light was like breathing, and it gradually grew stronger as Qin Jian activated the sword technique in his hand. After a while, that sword light was like a candle that lit up the space. The sword lights that were extinguished just now lit up one by one, and the light even spread, gradually forming a fierce wolf that was comparable to the yellow dragon. Chapter 25-37. Attack! Xiaohua waved his hand. Without waiting for Qin Jian's sword intent to form, the yellow dragon on the seal of the ocean pushed the seal towards the wolf's sword intent, just like how it opened up the passage before. Roar! Qin Jian's face became serious. He hurriedly urged his sword technique. The wolf roared and actually opened its mouth, swallowing the seal of the ocean into its stomach. Seeing the seal of the ocean and the yellow dragon disappear, a powerful sealing power came from the wolf's sword light, as if it wanted to cut off its connection with the seal of the ocean. Xiaohua smiled coldly. The spell in his hand changed again. A strong ray of light came out from the wolf's stomach like a needle. Then, thousands of rays of light shot out from different parts of the wolf's sword light. With a loud boom, the sword light that transformed into a huge wolf was completely suppressed by the light of the seal of the ocean. It was torn into pieces by the light of the seal of the ocean. Ha ha ha, Xiaohua laughed proudly. Qin you're only... Even if you have such a fierce sword intent, what's the use of it against me? Looking at Xiaohua's appearance, he seemed to have forgotten about his lack of true essence earlier. He didn't even care about the magic power he was using to urge the seal of the ocean with all his strength. He didn't even care about the lack of true essence in his meridians. Seeing Xiaohua being so arrogant, Qin Jian's expression changed. Xiaohua was using true essence, and he was also using sword essence. He really couldn't figure out how much true essence Xiaohua had in his body. He also couldn't figure out whether Xiaohua was a golden core or foundation establishment. Go! Qin Jian shouted. The sword light started to gather again. That terrifying wolf head appeared again. You think I'm afraid of you? Xiaohua smiled coldly. His magic power surged. The seal of the ocean turned into a dragon again and again. Rumbling sounds echoed in the air of flowing ice valley. In the distance, Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao stood in the air. Even though no sword cultivator came to chase after them, their hearts were clenched together. However, their clenched hearts were also incomparably shocked. An indescribable feeling spread in their hearts. Today, they had seen Xiaohua's true strength. It was definitely a strength that overturned their original understanding. Not to mention themselves, even if they were masters, how could they reach such heights? Li Zongbao's heart was filled with bitterness. He had already overestimated Xiaohua's cultivation, but now it seemed that what he overestimated was only the tip of the iceberg. What he knew was nothing more than a tree in the forest. Other than being shocked, Xiao Mao was also envious and longing. He was deeply aware of the power of the dragon transformation art, but he never thought that the dragon transformation art would have such an effect. When he first met Xiaohua, he was disdainful of Xiaohua, but now, Xiaohua's height was something he could only look up to. However, he remembered that he also had the dragonization ability, which meant that he also had a path forward. Xiao Mao was extremely eager to learn it, and he might be able to reach that level in the near future. This is for sure. Xiao Mao's eyes flashed with determination. Xiaohua's encouragement to him was far more than any encouragement in the world. All of his master's methods were also insignificant in his eyes. He knew that as long as he relied on the dragon transformation art, he would definitely be able to condense a core in the future, or even conceive a baby. However, the two of them turned their heads almost at the same time and exchanged glances. They seemed to have realized something. Xiaohua had always been concealing his strength. Even when he met a strong enemy, he would hide some of his cultivation. When had he ever tried to be brave like today? Could it be that his spiritual power wasn't affected by the spirit-binding juice at all just now? Could it be that his spiritual power is so abundant that it can be compared to a nascent soul cultivator? The moment the two of them looked at each other, they saw a trace of doubt in each other's eyes. Qin Jian's scheme. The two of them exclaimed at the same time. Li Zongbao hurriedly shouted, "Junior brother Xiao, let's send a message quickly." At this time, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on the battlefield was in chaos. Qi waves and shock waves spread out. Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao knew that they couldn't get close, but they were also afraid of disturbing Xiaohua's attention, so they could only do this. However, no matter how they sent a message, Xiaohua didn't respond. It was as if Xiaohua turned a deaf ear to everything outside the battlefield. This is not normal. Li Zongbao immediately came to a conclusion. He raised the immortal piercing whip and said anxiously, "Junior brother Xiao, wait a moment. I'll go over now." "I'll go over too." Xiao Mao was naturally very anxious. The two of them had already thrown caution to the wind. Why would they care about their own lives? However, at this time, the situation on the battlefield changed again. After more than 10 collisions, the huge wolf shape had already dimmed. It was like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished with just one more breath. Xiao Hua's heart was filled with ecstasy. He urged his true essence and his magic power surged into the spell that was gradually forming at his fingertips. However, at this moment, Xiao Hua's meridians trembled and signs of his true essence drying up flashed by. If it was normal, Xiao Hua would have been alert. However, at this time, Xiao Hua's eyes were bloodshot. He only wanted to tear Qin Jian's head off. Why would he care about such minor details? He waved his hand and a few more elixirs were sent into his mouth. He shouted, "Come, come, come. I'll let you have a taste of my power." Then, the medicinal power of the elixirs was quickly refined. His spiritual power surged like waves. Just as Xiao Hua's spell was sent into the seal of Overturn the Sea, two rays of light flew out from Xiao Hua's left and right. One was the shadow of Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip, and the other was Xiao Mao's universe ring. They turned into flowing light and rushed into the battlefield. Boom, boom. Although Xiao Hua's seal of Overturn the Sea and Qin Jian's flying sword did not collide directly with the two's magical treasures, the two of them had fought for a long time. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth nearby was completely disturbed. Not only was the sword light overflowing, but the light and power of the seal of Overturn the Sea were also nearby and did not dissipate. Although the two magical treasures were used by Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao, when they collided with the light of the seal of Overturn the Sea and Qin Jian's sword light, they could only let out a roar. The two magical treasures were sent flying. At the same time, their primordial spirits were also heavily injured. They could not help but fly backwards for more than 10 feet. Pu. 2 mouthfuls of blood essence were spat out from their mouths at almost the same time. The two of them were originally injured in the karst cave. Their spiritual power was exhausted. Now that they had just recovered a little, how could they be a match for the two of them? However, even though the two of them were dispirited in mid-air and barely managed to stabilize their bodies, they still had some gains. After all, they had two magical treasures as an external cause. Xiao Hua was slightly shocked. The spiritual sense that he had left behind on the battlefield hurriedly swept outwards. When he saw the injuries of the two of them, he was slightly shocked. However, it was only a shock. The killing intent in his heart surged up again, almost unstoppable. Killing! Xiao Hua's heart suddenly had a kind of enlightenment. Everyone has killing intent in their hearts. Everyone has darkness. It's just that this darkness has always been covered by light and cannot be discovered. Even though this young master feels that he is extremely open and aboveboard, this young master is not an immortal, but only an immortal cultivator. This darkness is far from being removed. Now that there is an opportunity, a reason to trigger this darkness can't be suppressed. However, even though Xiao Hua knew, even though he felt that this kind of unrestrained killing was indeed refreshing, but what was the end of the refreshing feeling? He was not clear in his heart. However, he was clear in his heart that this pleasure of killing was provoked by Qin Jian. He had already unknowingly fallen into Qin Jian's scheme. Falling into the opponent's scheme. Could the ending be a rise in cultivation? Could it be a safe escape? Xiao Hua hurriedly tried to think of a way to save Qin Jian. He wanted to calm himself down, but that uncontrollable impulse kept attacking him, making him unable to control his true essence. His magic power surged out again, and the seal of ocean overturning roared as it rushed towards Qin Jian's sword light. Why can't I control myself? Xiao Hua was aghast and began to form hand seals again. Not good. Spirit binding juice. Spirit binding juice. Xiao Hua suddenly had a thought in his mind. In the jade pendant, it mentioned the after effects of the spirit binding juice, but it was not clear what it was. Could it be? This is the after effects of the spirit binding juice? Immediately, Xiao Hua's divine sense swept across the calm Qin Jian in the distance, only to see the corner of Qin Jian's mouth slightly raised. He actually looked like he had a card up his sleeve. Damn it! Why does this young master have the after effects of the spirit binding juice? Why don't Li Zongbao and Xiao Mao have any after effects? Xiao Hua was secretly surprised, but in a moment, he gave the answer himself. Nonsense, the two of them just fought in the underground cave for a long time. Even if there were any after effects, it would have long been gone. This young master. Alas! What should I do? Xiaohua naturally did not know that when Li Zongbao saw his martial uncle being killed by Qin Jian, the killing intent in his heart also went out of control. If not for the fact that he had already killed many sword cultivators in the cave and was firmly restrained by Xiaohua, he might also be in some danger. Xiaohua's spiritual power uncontrollably flowed into the Seal of Tumbling Ocean. The Seal of Tumbling Ocean overflowed with brilliance, the yellow dragon stirred the air, and it was full of yellow shadows, completely suppressing Qin Jian's sword light. Xiaohua seemed to be winning, but Xiaohua understood that he was only looking good on the surface, completely relying on the support of the elixir. He was falling step by step into the grave that Qin Jian had dug for him. Roar! Qin Jian's giant wolf took shape again, roaring towards the sky. Not only did it absorb the surrounding spiritual energy, it also awakened the last trace of killing intent in Xiaohua's heart. Kill! Xiaohua's eyes were also completely red. The Seal of Tumbling Ocean smashed towards the giant wolf. At this moment, the giant wolf was vivid and lifelike. The sword light in its eyes revealed a kind of cunning and cruelty. It was reflected in Xiaohua's eyes, and also penetrated into Xiaohua's heart. Seeing such a vivid beast's nature, Xiaohua could not help but think of Reverend Brightsword's little deer sword intent. Like a flash of lightning, Xiaohua's mind entered the space without hesitation. With a wave of his hand, Reverend Brightsword's flying sword appeared in his hand. Immediately, a cool feeling from Reverend Brightsword's flying sword entered his hand, and this cool feeling slowly but clearly rushed into his heart meridian, rushing into his body. This cool feeling was like the little deer nimbly jumping over the stream, jumping over the grass, and hiding in the cave. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.